Hello and welcome everyone to the 90th episode of Everyday Journal, your favorite, officially most deceptively named bi-weekly podcast. Callum, how have you been doing? How's it going, man?
I'm good. I'm very good. I was about to say the big 9-0. Doing pretty well. Really been playing loads of Legacy this last week. Loving playing some new cards and stuff. There was the Man Traders event on the weekend just gone. It's been kind of non-stop Legacy actually. Really, really loving what's going on. How about you?
Yeah, that's amazing to hear. Actually, I haven't touched Magic Online ever since the great Wednesday MTGO catastrophe of 2020. For those who aren't playing on Magic Online utterly broke on last Wednesday, basically, when they introduced a new update. And without getting into too much details, I think the technical term is fucking screwed it up.
That's definitely what's been put into notebooks and stuff. It's like if you imagine you have a robot and it just kind of falls on its back and starts twitching and you see some sparks coming out of it. It's still got the inner workings to make it work, but it doesn't really do what it's meant to do. It was pretty funny because I had faith that they'd fix it pretty within a couple of days, but the bad things were really, really bad. It was just really funny, I thought. But
it's funny that we speak about a scope of a couple of days for a self-proclaimed top 5 esports company. Meanwhile, people were writing their own guides about how to install their software because nobody could get it to work.
Yeah. The thing is, I actually managed to install mine straight away on the first day and could play. I played a cube draft or two in that evening, but most people couldn't get in, so I have no idea why. But the thing is, when you reinstall it, you erase all your history and match history, which is a real shame for a lot of people. So, yeah, I don't keep track of things. I'm not one of those people, and I'm quite lazy with that kind of stuff. So I just okay, it's all gone, whatever. But for other people, I was talking to Tom Hepp, who wanted to go over his matches and record it for YouTube and talk to people about certain matchups and stuff. And it's obviously a big loss for him because he was using lots of his past matches to cherry pick the good and interesting ones. So yeah, it was a real shame that it happened. It could have been avoided quite easily, I'm sure, but here we are.
Yeah, here we are. So it's mostly back to normal now, right? There's no bugs.
There's still something.
Known bugs.
There's a visual bug when you start the part of the bar where all your stops are. It's really far at the end, and it looks kind of funny. But as far as I know, everything's mostly back to normal.
Awesome. So yeah, that's what has kept me from playing. But I'm already reinstalling now, and now it's probably gonna work for me as well. But I've been mostly busy with different stuff. I've been working a lot on our hotel reopening that's gonna come in December. I just told you guys I sold my second most expensive Safari ever for I think 27. Actually, this is going to be a beep because we actually sell the Safari for less than what the clients actually end up paying because that's how business works. So.
What is involved in a Safari that expensive? How many lions and tigers do you see?
If you see any tigers, you can consider yourself lucky because there's no tigers in Africa.
Right. Good answer.
#fuck the tiger. That's something this is Safari guides sometimes say when people keep asking for the tigers because that's actually a thing that sometimes happens.
Right.
So the biggest thing is that you pick the most expensive camps. It's not so much about which parks you go to because the park fees there are negligible. They're basically $80 a day for Masamara, and that's not the big deal. The big deal is really the camps, and the camps the client selected, they are super, super top notch, and the service providers and everything and the guides, they're absolutely top notch. And afterwards, they also stay on the beach, but usually the beach extension isn't that expensive anyway.
Cool.
And it's way in the future, so it's not we're doing some COVID travel or something. It's actually next autumn, so almost a year away, and hopefully that's gonna work because places are booked out like crazy. I could barely get those rooms and those tents in the Safari camps because everybody who wanted to travel this year, they've been postponing, everybody's on hold, and now so basically next year in Kenya, and I guess most other places, it's gonna see double the amount of tourism that would have been there normally. So if you were gonna go on a safari, better book your places now.
Yeah, everything is just postponing. I have 2 music festivals just postponed until when they can go ahead. So I'm just okay, well, at least I have them in my back pocket and stuff. But it's going to be weird when we get out of it and everyone's going everywhere, but that's cool.
Yeah. In speaking of postponing, we actually have a very special guest on our show whom I wanted to have on the podcast basically ever since he drumroll, won the Legacy GP last year. The last Legacy GP we've seen thus far. And that's my good friend Marc Eric Vogt from Munich. Marc, hey man, how's it going? Good to have you on the show.
Hey Julian, hey Callum, thank you so much for having me. It was actually a great honor for me that you invited me. I love your show. I hear all of your episodes, actually in double speed, but yeah, I hear all of them. And yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Marc, what have you been up to? How's your day been? We just heard that you don't only play Magic, you play a ton of other games, right?
That is true. I love all kinds of card games. Like after Magic, my second favorite one is MECCG. That's Middle Earth trading collectible card game. That's a really great game. It's dead since I think 99 or something. The last card was produced, and it has a ton of flavor. I love it. But actually today I played a different game which actually fits your intro sound, I think. Unfortunately, we didn't hear it today, but yeah, your intro sound, I like it a lot. Pokemon, right?
Yeah. This is allegedly that hashtag copyright infringement. It might be Pokemon. I've heard people compare it to it. Yeah.
Oh, so, okay, yeah.
What's your favorite Pokemon? Do you play like I've never played Pokemon. Do you play like a single Pokemon, or do you play like 20 different Pokemon? How does it work?
Oh, you can have up to 6 Pokemon on the field, but only one is fighting. At least in the format that I play. I play the old format where there's only the original 151 Pokemon allowed. It's called Pokemon.99, and I have just started playing it. I actually played my first match today, right before we started the recording here. I played 2 matches actually with my deck, and I just had to because I think today about 15 letters with Pokemon cards arrived since I ordered all of them on the weekend. And it has been a great feeling. Just the original Pokemon, as I said, you can have up to 6 on the board, and I think my favorite Pokemon is I think how's it the English name, the Dratini, like the original form from Dragonite. I really like that one. That was my favorite one when I was a child. And I also like Mew a lot, which is, I guess, kind of mainstream, but I like him. It's cool.
So that format sounds a little bit like old school 93, 94, so you can only play like the original cards, and is that kind of similar?
It's exactly similar. It's exactly that. It's just the original sets. It's just whatever has been released in the first year, actually. It's a Pokemon base set, Jungle, and Fossil, and 8 promo cards. These promo cards have been given away if you went to the movies in 99.
And they must be really expensive.
They are not that expensive. The most expensive cards are just from the base game, because collectors buy them. The most expensive cards are like Charizard, how are they called? Bulbasaur and Tortoise. Tortoise, yeah, the last evolution of Squirtle, right?
It's so funny because in Germany, like, we all grew up with Pokemon, with the German names of Pokemon. So I never really know I barely know the German ones, and I even less know about the English names of the Pokemon. So to me, it's Shiggy, not Squirtle.
Yeah. But actually, if you guys are interested in the people that play old school Magic, I can only recommend the format. And it's you should definitely, the format is growing right now, and you should definitely just buy the trainer cards, which are basically the spells in the game. You need a lot of rare trainer cards, which all the decks share basically, and they are still like €1 each. I'm really surprised because the Pokemon, they are not that much more rare, right? But they cost hundreds or even thousands of euros in case of Charizard. So the Pokemon part of them are really expensive, but the trainer cards are not. And I guess that's because of the collectors. But if this format grows, which I think it will, the most important thing is that you have your trainer cards, because you play 4 of them and the Pokemon usually only play 1 or 2 of.
So here's going to be your everyday Pokemon cast that's going to come in the future.
No, of course,
you said you played as well?
Sorry, of course we should switch to Magic. I was just, you asking me what I was up to today, so that was kind of my fun part for today. But I played a lot of Magic recently, and most of it online now, so...
Yeah, that's something that's really exciting to me, because I've known you basically since my first Legacy tournament ever, like 15 years ago or something. And you've always been one of the most successful, determined players that I've known. And that's always been super impressive to me. And to see you start playing online and basically showing your skills to the world. I mean, you already did it, the GP that you won, I guess. But streaming, you picked up streaming. We're going to have a link to that in the show notes. And doing well in these online tournaments is really impressive because especially during the SCG Open days, there was always, I felt like this huge American bias. And I always felt like, guys, you have no idea which kind of killers we have in Europe, which you just like don't hear about, which are incredibly good. And like you and Marius Hausmann and a couple of others were always like the ones I had on my mind. But basically overseas, nobody knew about you because there's like no way to really show off what you can do. And that's just like really cool to see you. What actually happened that you started playing online couple months ago?
I think it's pretty obvious. So originally I hated playing online, honestly. I just don't enjoy it nearly as much as playing with friends, which is the reason that I never actually played Legacy online. I just always played with friends. We have like a very good Legacy scene here in Munich. I guess, Julian, you also know it. You're only living like a couple of kilometers away from my house, so not too far. So we have a really great community. Julian was pushing it through the last decade, I think. So a really nice community, and we had tournaments basically every weekend if you are willing to travel about, let's say, 1 hour to Nuremberg or Rosenheim or whatever. And so I was able to just play real life tournaments every weekend, and also Friday Night Magic Legacy for like the last 2 or 3 years. I went there like at least twice a month. So I actually played a fair share of Legacy, but not nearly as much as the grinders on MTGO do. So I was actually surprised, honestly, that I was able to take down a GP. I wouldn't have thought so myself because I just don't have the same amount of training reps that anybody has who plays online.
Yeah, but you've got, if you ask me, you've always had probably one of the best approaches to the game because I don't know, I think I can feel it when somebody is not bullshitting himself, when somebody's like honest with himself. And you know how there's players who will tell you, oh, it works like this, it works like that. And it's always like very simple, very black and white. And you're like one of the people whom I talk to about Magic, where I get the feeling, okay, you understand Magic and Legacy better than somebody who wants to break it down to very simple heuristics, very simple terms. And I mean, you will tell us what's the secret behind your success, but I always felt like the way you think about stuff, you're not caught up in, oh, I want it to be easy to digest and stuff. You actually want to know how it really works, and I think that really reflects in your win rate. Can we quickly talk about that? You've been playing Magic Online for, I think, 2 months now or something, and you have like an over 80% win rate. I was actually going to list the tournaments that you won and top 8'd, but that's like way too much at this point. I think you won the AnziD Invitational, you top 4'd the Mana Traders thing last time, you won the Legacy Challenge, you top 8'd a Legacy Challenge almost by accident because, like, dude, every time I tune into your stream, you win a ton of money. That's incredibly impressive.
Oh, definitely, and I think I had a really good win rate when I started playing Magic Online. I started streaming, and I was like, maybe I'm gonna be too distracted from chat. But I think the first 40 matches I played on stream, we were still above 90% win percentage in leagues. So above 90, that I guess I had some luck there too, because I think you can't reasonably sustain that. But yeah, win percentage about above 80% is definitely reasonable. I have that for 7 Legacy GPs that I played so far. My win percentage over 80%, over 7 GPs. It was actually over 80% before I won the GP. So
that is ridiculous. 80% on everything is just completely ridiculous. Like, I think we should just ban you from the format. This is stupid.
It should be a good amount above 80% now that I won the GP.
Crazy.
was pretty good, yeah. And that includes a GP where I went let me think 3-4 drop, win 3, lose 4, where I played High Tide and played against Reanimator 3 times in a row, which is basically.
Oh, that was Amsterdam, right? That was Amsterdam when we were both gonna play. We were both gonna play High Tide, and like a day before the tournament, I told you I can't play High Tide here. This is like the metagame is way too bad for it, and that's when I actually got my best finish ever with Maverick. But yeah, I remember that. That was 2011 Amsterdam. We were both going to play High Tide.
I got destroyed. I mean, I still had fun because I had my 4 candelabras back then in the deck, and that was the most the thing that I wanted to play. I always want to play with sweet cards, and I love candelabra, so that was fun actually. But yeah, So yeah, let's get back to the question. So what's my secret? I think the secret is kind of simple. I'm a very mathematically thinking guy. So everything I think about, I try to understand it from the bottom up. Basically, I have always been the guy. If you go back to school, I have always been the guy that was not happy if you could just solve the question. I needed to understand everything and why it was that way. That's how my mind works. And I think that's also what brought me in my career, which I always actually set in first in my life before all the magic stuff. That's also a different story, I guess, but I didn't go to my first Pro Tour, which I was qualified to in 2007, because I had an exam on that weekend and I didn't want to postpone it. So as I said, I always put my career plans first, and with that in mind, I studied mechanical engineering, and I also did a PhD in applied mathematics about machine learning and artificial intelligence. It's also the field that I work in now. So what I'm getting at is basically that I have basically evolved this mathematically thinking mind all my life. That's kind of what I'm good at. That's what I like to do. And that's how I approach Magic too, with a very, very mathematical mind. I try to always have a plan. I try to always play by my odds. I like to take risks, calculated risks, where other players are like, I think there's a very good example for that, where in the finals of the AnziD tournament, my opponent has only one card left. He plays it, and it's how's it called? The legendary creature that can flashback artifacts from your graveyard.
Emry.
Emry.
Yeah, Emry, that's right. So they play that card, and my last card actually is Archmage Charm. And I know that they have Chalice in their graveyard, and that it's not gonna be good for me if they untap with Emry. But what I think about is, okay, I have Red Blast in my deck, I have Swords to Plowshares in my deck. I also had 3 lands in play. If I can find a fetch land and the draw spell, I can just fetch and Mystic Sanctuary and put like a Red Blast from the graveyard back on top. So what I'm getting at is I calculated the amount of outs I had if I just draw 2 cards. Why did I do that? Well, if I can answer the Emry with one of the 2 cards that I draw, I get an extra free card. So instead of countering it, which was of course super risky, because if I don't find anything I will probably lose, I drew 2 cards, and this time it worked really well, and I think my percentages of getting there were way above 50%. So this is kind of how I approach the game, and I'm also not scared to do these kind of tactics, even in the finals of a huge tournament.
Yeah, and I really like that about watching you play, because I mean, that's no surprise. I've always had issues with this. Oh, I don't want to look bad. I always want to play well, but also not take any risk. Because I basically have issues with this whole super risk-averse playstyle, because that misses out on a lot of EV by missing those plays, right, that are plus EV that you just don't do because you might look bad if it doesn't work out, like in the small percent of cases.
Definitely. I always tell that to the players, that they should assess their options and also their outs, and also if they can try to get a feeling of how probable it is. I think you get that feeling mostly in Magic through a lot of repetition, honestly. I'm really sticking to the kind of deck that I play for a long time now. So by playing the same deck a lot, you'll get a feeling for how likely things are. Of course, you can try to calculate things, but for example, that example where I just said with the Archmage Charm, of course, I did not like count my deck size, count my outs. Like, this would take way too long. On Modo, you have to really play for your clock, especially with a control deck like this, which is also a huge challenge to me. And sure, it would be possible to calculate these things, but it's not really feasible during a match. So you need to get a feeling for the likelihoods. And I think the second secret to success that I have is having a game plan. That sounds kind of trivial, but it's actually the most important in Legacy, because you have Ponder, Brainstorm, In my case, you also have Jace, Sylvan Library, Fetchlands, Mystic Sanctuary, which gives you a lot of options. If you look at basically every turn this specific deck that I play, with Band Miracles, it always has so many options, and you really, really need to know what is your game plan. I can give an example for that. In the quarterfinals of the tournament this weekend, of the Mana Traders tournament, I played against the green-white Reclaimer deck. And everybody was telling me before that, oh, it's a Field of the Dead deck, your deck can't really beat that, it's a really bad matchup for you. And I started testing that matchup, and I actually tested 4 matches of it, and I went 4-0 against really good players, actually, against Lynn Chalice, who's also streaming, against Magus of the Moon, who's also streaming, so respectable players. And the reason for that was that I figured out, okay, I have to find Shark Typhoon, which is a one-off in my deck, and I have to win with Shark Typhoon because that goes over the top of Field of the Dead, and that's basically the only way you can win. So in these 4 matches, the 8 games that I won, I think I won 7 of them with the Shark Typhoon on the table. And that's showing how insane Ponder and Brainstorm are if you are able to find your one-off in 7 out of 8 matches. And I think that's not a fluke, that is, if you play correctly, about the likelihood that you should get.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. Like, even just to go further than that, like, you had identified a game plan in a specific matchup, but using cantrips is like, I mean, we could talk about it for hours, I'm sure, but when you're casting Ponders and Brainstorms, you should know what you want from your deck before you even cast it. If you don't know what you want, if you're just casting it for the sake of casting it, then you probably are using it incorrectly. So in these cases, you are looking for Shark Typhoon or more cantrips to find Shark Typhoon, basically. And that is the game plan you identified. And against other decks, sometimes you just want to cast it to find a land, whatever. But yeah, you need to know exactly what you want to do with these cantrips and what your game plan looks like. Like, you could also have, you think your game plan is Shark Typhoon, but that's an end game. So you're first cantripping for the removal and the land drops and maybe Force of Will to get you to that end game, and then the Shark Typhoon. So yeah, managing your resources and cantrips and stuff and into this formulating a plan, which you can have before the game even starts, is so critical to winning with these kind of decks. So yeah, completely
definitely agree. And I think there's a second piece to that puzzle. It's not only the cantrips, but the version of the deck that I like to play plays 8 Force of Will, basically 4 Force of Will and 4 Force of Negation. And you have to know what you have to counter. If you counter the wrong thing, if you get yourself down a card 2-for-1 in a control deck, and you're not countering the card you're supposed to counter, you have a very good shot of losing. So this deck is not very forgiving. So if you pick it up, you might not win in the beginning, and that is because of exactly that. It's a brainstorming, but it's also how you use your forces and your Force of Negation. And I think that can also be shown in that green-white Reclaimer matchup. Because there everybody was telling me, oh yeah, the problematic card is the Dryad, which gives all the lands, all the 5 basic land types, and makes it so that Valakut can shoot and they can play 2 lands a turn. And I figured out that's not true. You need to keep them from assembling additional resources with Elfish Reclaimer and Flexstone of Troke here, and with Sylvan Library. These are the most important things to counter, and you can, if you can just let the Dryad resolve, and if they don't have enough lands, it just doesn't do anything. So these are parts. Now it's just an example, the green-white Reclaimer deck, but that's how complicated playing a Legacy is these days. You really have to know for each single matchup which are the cards that I'm gonna lose to, and what is my game plan, what do I need to dig for with my Brainstorm and my Ponder.
And those are also like what I consider the most interesting discussions in Legacy, in the format. That's what I always say when I say people that are not as experienced or not as ambitious, they will often talk tactics, like what can I do that's like a really smart tactical move, but they don't think about the strategy in the matchup. And I think that's probably one of the most underrated things in the format. That, I don't know, if you're listening to this, do you think about strategy? Do you have, like, as Marc says, your game plan for all the most common matchups, and ideally even beyond that? I mean, at some point it becomes a matter of experience, but I totally agree. on that, because that's basically what I mean when I say strategy is underrated. And it's kind of refreshing to hear that from you as well. To me, I think one of the biggest revelations was when I was actually like listening to Day9's Brood War dailies like from 10 years ago, where he also talked about that you gotta have a game plan, like a match plan for every matchup. And even if it's bad, at least you can, then you have something you can evaluate against. So, for example, if you in this matchup would think, oh, it might be super much about Field of the Dead, and I have to do something about Field of the Dead, blah, blah, blah. And then you realize, okay, that's not working out. Then okay, I gotta change my strategy. But if you don't even think about stuff in terms like this, then you probably don't get to that kind of revelation. And I think that's the way to think about Magic. That really helps you improve as a player, and that's kind of cool to hear. And I think everybody who's not doing that and wants to improve, just think about your strategy, your game plan. Even if it's wrong, you will understand why it's wrong, and if you don't understand, you can always reach out to other players. And I think that's a big takeaway here.
To add a little bit to it, like when you say you should understand your game plan, I think even that can be a bit vague for someone that doesn't do it very often. So when I was young, obviously, but when I was like newer to Legacy, I did ask similar questions to someone that's more experienced, and they said, "Oh yeah, you need to have a game plan." And I was like, "Okay, I feel silly for asking this, but what is a game plan?" And we kind of started to explain it, but I think you need to imagine, just play out a match in your head. Like think, okay, with the same example, this Miracles deck against Greenwood Reclaimer, just play the matches in your head and think of how it goes well for you. What happens? Don't like think of corner cases like the top deck Terminus that might have happened in the quarterfinals, but think of normal cases where they play a Reclaimer and you swords it and you play your land drops and it goes on, and then put yourself to some decisions like, if I had these resources, what would I do here? You can really imagine all these things, and you just need to imagine what it takes to win, and then you can play to that in the matches themselves. And you need to see how the game ends when you're winning, basically, to know what to play for as well.
Yeah, that's what I sometimes like to call matchup dynamics. Like, what are common play patterns that happen, and what are the choices that you have? Because in many situations you don't really have a choice, but sometimes you do, and those are the big ones where you can steer the matchup in one direction or the other. So every time you find yourself in a situation where you think, I could do this, but I could also not do it, that's where your game plan becomes a huge factor. I mean, if there's a Dread Arcanist sitting in front of you and you have a removal spell, in most of the cases you probably want to take it out, but even then it's not always. So just to provide an example from my side, from the Elf side, when we talk about stuff like game plans, when I played against Delver in the past, if they had like turn 1 Delver and I was on the play, I would always decay it, just because it conserves my life total and it's the best thing I can hit anyways. These days, I very often will be happy to take like a couple of hits just to see whether a Dreadhorde Arcanist is coming down, because the Dreadhorde Arcanist is so much more devastating that these days I'm more willing to take hits from the Delver, and that's basically part of my game plan against Delver. And I think that's just like the stuff you think about, and that factors into what's eventually going to be your game plan.
Totally. And to actually make another example of elves, if someone just threw elves in my hands, I've been playing it a lot recently, as you might have noticed, and really loving it. And if someone just gave me elves and then I went into like sideboarding against Snowco, for example, in the sideboard there are Thought Seizes and Abrupt Decays. I definitely would have started by siding the Abrupt Decays because I'm scared of like Containment Priest, Plague Engineer especially, and stuff like that. But you and other elves players have formulated this plan that, wow, since they stopped playing Toxic Deluge and they play Dead of Winter, they can't answer a Progenitus. So actually you side in a Progenitus and side in the Thought Seizes to deal with the counter magic to try and force through a natural order for Progenitus. And that is an example of like a very, very concise, clear game plan. Like, you don't even side in the Abrupt Decays, even if they have Plague Engineer, because that is not part of how you win the sideboard games. You just sidestep a lot of their hate. The Containment Priest is a problem as well, but you hope to try and snipe it with the Thought Seize. But it's just another example of building a deck around a certain game plan as well. So it goes so deep, doesn't it? But it's such an interesting conversation about how every deck should have some kind of plan and some build in mind to deal with certain things.
Okay, so I actually have a third thing that might be a bit controversial in this group, especially what I think is a trifactor of me having such a high win percentage. It's the mathematical thing with the outs. You have to calculate your outs. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is have a plan. Know what you do with your brainstorm, ponder, and forces. And the third thing actually is have brainstorm, ponder, and force in your deck. I mean, I don't want to disillusion you, but I honestly think that the win percentage of above 80% is over a longer period is really only possible if you can eliminate variance as much as possible. You know, like for example, in chess, you can have insanely high win percentages. You can basically be undefeatable by a player that's worse than you. Why? Because there's no variance. And in order to remove variance, the card Brainstorm, Ponder, and Force of Will help so much. Without Force of Will, you cannot beat any of the broken turn 1 starts. Without Brainstorm or Ponder, you'll be more likely to get mana screwed or mana flooded. And these things, you can be as good as you like, you cannot control them. And in order to get really, really high win percentages, you need to make games as low variance games as you possibly can. That's basically also the same idea with like a Delver deck. You don't need to play Banned Miracles for that. Delver also tries to do the same thing every time and do it as consistently as possible.
So in speaking of these metrics that you have, I was actually wondering which decks in Legacy do you like right now? You already mentioned that you like Banned Miracles, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the near future here, but which other decks in Legacy do you maybe not even like, but which decks do you consider to be quote-unquote the best in Legacy right now, the most likely to take down any tournament?
I think if you're good at it, I really like Doomsday.
Mm-hmm.
It's not played that much, but it got a lot better, of course, with Tassa's Oracle. And I think it's a poster child for a deck that tries to reduce variance. It can be very fast and can also do a longer game plan since it can fight on its own with forces and days. And as such, the win condition is very powerful. You can also win out of nowhere, right? You can just Lotus Petal out Dark Ritual, Doomsday, even if you actually don't really have mana or anything on the board. Which I think is a pretty strong thing to do. So I can definitely see that is one of the strongest decks. Then I honestly consider the deck that I played, that Banned Miracles, is, in my opinion, a stronger choice than regular 4-color Snow.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, if you want to compare it to other Brainstorm Ponder decks, it's also definitely a better choice than Delver. Another Brainstorm Ponder deck that I really like, which is not as well known, I guess, is, we call it Pokepile, I guess, which is a Delverless Delver deck that skims on Delver and playing some more late game like Uro and Narset with a combination of Stifle. This deck is also incredibly consistent, and I think it's less powerful than the Banned Miracles deck, but it really has the option with Stifle and Wasteland to get free wins, which you don't have with Banned Miracles. And if you are looking for a deck, you always have to look out for power, consistency, but also for free wins. And that is one of the biggest downsides that Banned Miracles has. You don't get free wins.
That's true. That's something I always appreciate in a deck, like the free win aspect, especially if you're playing a long tournament. It's I don't know. It's a really big deal to me. But yeah, you don't really get those outside of, I guess, scenarios where you totally devastate them with like a Terminus or well, I guess if they are mana screwed, that's not really a factor of your deck. That's more like a thing that randomly happens. But yeah, let's actually speak about your deck here. I've got it in front of me. We're gonna put it in the show notes. I want to say you're one of the very few people who are actually still playing a deck that's actually like an actual Miracles deck, right? That plays Terminus and stuff. Like you have 2 Terminus in the main deck. I actually don't see a third one in the sideboard, so I guess that's where we are right now. And for those who don't know, it's pretty straightforward. You got 3 Icewind Codals, you got 2 Uros, you got 3 Okos, 2 Chase, the Mind Sculptor, a card we don't really see very often these days. And then a bunch of 4-offs, 4 Brainstorms, 4 Ponders, 4 Swords to Plowshares, 4 Force of Wills, 4 Force of Negations, 4 Archon's Astrolabe. And then the fine print is 1 Archmage's Charm. We should actually say what that card does. I think it's triple blue. And you can either draw 2 cards, you can counter a spell, or you can gain control of target creature with converted mana cost. Is it 1 or less?
It's a permanent.
It's target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 1 or less, yes.
Oh, wow, that's actually broken.
So it can get a vibe, but very importantly, it's target player draws 2 cards. Mark can explain why that's important.
Oh yeah, that is very important indeed. That's a nice catch, Callum.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I thought that was just funny, but it's actually super mega relevant in the matchup that I just mentioned, Doomsday. Because my favorite thing to do against Doomsday is letting Doomsday resolve. That is, if you have Archmage Charm in hand, what you can do is wait until they play their Oracle. Either they already have at that point less than 2 cards in their library, and in response to the Oracle trigger, you just Archmage Charm them, and they will lose because they can't draw 2 cards anymore. There's a second version where they try to outsmart you and play Oracle with exactly 2 cards left in their library, which would also win. But fortunately, we have Swords to Plowshares and Red Blast in the sideboard, so we have options to respond to that. So what you're doing is then you Swords the Oracle in response. They have to draw the other 2 cards, which often they can with just cycling Street Races, and if they're a good player. And you can just then win with Archmage Charm. And the nice thing about it is that most of their defense, usually, especially if they made a pile, is Thoughtseize. And it's so hard to Thoughtseize Archmage Charm from our deck because we have 2 Mystic Sanctuary.
It's a really good plan. Cool. Yeah. And so you beat Oops with this plan as well, right?
Oh yeah. I like that too. That is less common because actually against talking about game plans, against Doomsday, it actually is my game plan to find Archmage Charm and let Doomsday resolve. That is my actual game plan. That's not a joke. That's game plan number 1.
This is the power of cantrips again. It's amazing. Yeah.
You're one of the very few decks that actually rather consistently actually beats Doomsday after it has resolved, because these days there's very few decks that can actually beat Doomsday outside of just attacking after Doomsday resolved. So that's pretty cool. Talking about your other one-offs in the deck, you still you have 1/7 library, which I guess goes well with Uro and just like the general game plan. You have a Shark Typhoon as a one-off in the sideboard in the main deck. You got a one-off Carpet of Flowers in the main deck with how much islands you were facing these days. And what you told me is the flag slot. Like in this list right now, we have the Court of Cunning, the blue card that just came out. You told me you also sometimes play Teferi or even a Stifle in that slot. So I guess you're undecided which one you prefer the most right now.
Okay, should I first talk about the carpet or my flag slot?
Hit me with anything you want.
Okay, let's do the carpet first. So the carpet is basically an attribute to how I see the format. In my mind, the best decks, again, are Pokepile, Band Miracles, Doomsday. And that was pretty good. I think it's a tiny bit behind those other 3 options, but it's pretty good too. And against all those decks, Carpet is insane. All these decks just can't beat Carpet. Even for Doomsday, it's a problem. I guess for Doomsday, it's the least problem, but even they play Daze. So Daze is one of the strongest cards in the format, right? And Carpet of Flowers destroys Daze. As soon as you have a Carpet in play, you're never ever gonna play into Daze again. And against a deck, for example, Pokepile, which plays Stifle and Wasteland, if they double Wasteland, you have a Stifle, whatever, and you resolve a Carpet, you just basically 3-for-1 them and got a lot of tempo. And in the mirror match, it's actually also unbeatable because you are playing a Mystic Sanctuary deck, so you have to get your islands. You can't do other things. And if you play a Soul Ring that produces 5 colored manas instead of 2 colorless, that's outright ridiculous. Carpet of Flowers is ridiculous.
And that's why you probably have extra copies in the sideboard. I'm checking right now. Yeah, you got 2 extra copies in the sideboard, no surprise there. The card is really, really good. I've only ever played it in Fs, and I've also been super impressed with it there. And I can certainly see how it's gonna give you like an interesting like a really good advantage, because suddenly you can, cast your chase without even tapping out of all your counter spells that you have in hand, and even stop their stuff that's going on. Or Swords to Plowshares, the creatures that might hit it. And that's something I enjoy a lot.
So should I still talk about the flag slot?
No, we're gonna... No, seriously, yes. Let us know. What's the thinking behind that? What are the other cards that you're considering for that?
Okay. So the flag slot is interesting. For one, I moved up to 8 forces, which I didn't have like 2 months ago. And the problem, of course, with forces is that you might run out of cards. So I kind of wanted my last card, my flag slot, to be at least a 2-for-1, a card that draws cards. At the same time, I still think, again, Doomsday, very scary deck, and having one Archmage Charm against a fast deck, and most of the time you can't stop their Doomsday. It's just they do have too much defense, too much disruption. I thought that was not enough. So I kind of wanted my flag slots to be good against Doomsday, after they resolved the Doomsday, actually. And then there's one more thing. I wanted my flag slot to be good against Sylvan Library. Sylvan Library is the problem card number 1 for Band Miracles. All your removal spells, Swords to Plowshares, give the opponent life. You can't remove the Sylvan Library if your flag slot can't do it. So once a Sylvan Library hits the table, you usually lose game 1. That's as bad as it is if they resolve a Sylvan Library. I'm not even exaggerating.
Sounds pretty brutal.
What I'm getting at is if you consider all these things for your flag slot, you have some different options. So the first option, which is in the list right now, which you post, Julian, I think, is Court of Cunning. It's a new option. I didn't test it too much yet, but I like that it's a 2-for-1 basically, or even more. It draws you cards. I like that it's actually good against Doomsday. They can't really pass the turn anymore if you have this in play. They will also feel pressured even if they already resolve the Doomsday and you play this card. They will have to win in the next turn. So I like it there too. So it checks these 2 boxes. Obviously, it doesn't do anything against Sylvan Library. So another option would be to play Teferi. Teferi can bounce Sylvan Library, which I really like, and it's a 2-for-1. Obviously, it doesn't help you to resolve Doomsday. And then, the last option would be, I guess there's 2 more options, Stifle and Hull Breacher. I'm not going to talk too much about these, but basically Stifle is good because you can Mystic Sanctuary it back on top. It's the nut card against Doomsday. If you're really afraid of Doomsday, put 1 Stifle into your deck. It's really good, but of course it doesn't 2-for-1. It doesn't help against Sylvan Library, so I think I like it the least, but it's okay. And then there's Hull Breacher, which I tried this weekend. And it can kind of give you an advantage, mana advantage, and it is actually pretty good even if they resolve the Doomsday, for example. So let's still talk about Doomsday, and it's good against Sylvan Library if it sticks on the table, but it's at the same time it's very narrow in that in a lot of matchups you don't really want to play it out if they have removal for it, like swords, because otherwise you're pretty immune to swords. And at the same time, you don't want to play it out against the deck like Death in Texas, for example, where it just does nothing. So I tried Hull Breacher. I would advise against playing it.
I just want to add one last thing on Archmage's Charm, actually, just kind of backpedaling quickly, because actually you talking about it like this has kind of sparked my memory of you talking about the card in a chat between us. You wanted a spell which you can bring back with Mystic Sanctuary just for the fair matchups to pull you ahead in card advantage. And I thought this is really worth pointing out because when you look at Archmage's Charm, it does some cool things. It's kind of slightly overcosted for what it does, but it's flexible. But with your 2 Mystic Sanctuary as well, just to have this engine of pulling you ahead, I think was not something that I clicked onto when I saw it in the list. So it's worth mentioning, I think.
It's definitely worth mentioning. It's definitely an oversight for many people that look at this list and ask themselves, why is Archmage Charm here? The most important thing about Archmage Charm is not the thing about Doomsday, actually, because you're not going to play every round against Doomsday. In most matchup, just a draw 2, which you can put back on with Mystic Sanctuary. Before I had Archmage Charm in my deck, if you look at my GP list from last year, I had 2 Veil of Summer, which I still like, but back then people were not as prepared. A lot of blue-black decks back then with discard and counter magic, so I could use my Veil as a 2-for-1, which I put back on Mystic Sanctuary. But these days, so many decks are immune to it that I needed a different option to get me a 2-for-1 and to put back on top with Mystic Sanctuary. So yeah, Archmage Charm is exactly that.
Makes perfect sense. Love it.
There's an interesting pattern that I noticed when you speak about those cards that you want to include that you can, flashback or put back on top of your library, because that's exactly what another great Miracles pilot always used to tell me. That's super important. Philipp Schöniger, for those who do remember him. I mean, he's still alive, right? He just left the game. He was one of the very first to top 8 2 Legacy GPs, and he always talked about the value of recurring cards with Snapcaster Mage. So mostly when we talked about sideboard cards, he said he will rate a card much, much higher in the sideboard if you can Snapcaster it back. So even if there's, like an artifact or an enchantment that's maybe somewhat better than an instant or sorcery, if the instant or sorcery is good enough, then he might pick that, because using Snapcaster Mage on it, it's just such a big advantage. And it reminds me a lot of what you say when you mention Mystic Sanctuary and putting the card back on top. So that's, I don't know, I definitely recognize that pattern, and I think that's something that's worth keeping in mind when you build your deck. And I guess there's a lot of people out there who would be interested in building this deck, because you're probably the best salesman for Miracles right now in the world, because so few people are actually playing it. Everybody's playing Snowco. And that actually brings me to one of the many, many questions that we have received from, for example, Dr. Sava or Dr. Xavier's playgroup. He's in our Discord, and he collected questions from I guess, his friends. And that question is, which cards do you fear the most as a Miracles player? And actually, also the question from our friend Fenris Cloud, why does Marc prefer Miracles over Snowco? So why don't we actually start there? Why do you like Miracles over Snowco? And which cards or decks is Miracles actually that much better against than Snowco that makes you want to play Miracles but not Snowco?
That's a really good question. I just answer it in a second. I just want to shortly go back to that. I'm actually super surprised that the Band Miracles play deck is basically not played at all. After I won the GP last year, which was December 2019, I was convinced that this deck is gonna take over the format. Everybody's gonna play it. We're gonna see it like Delver because it's so good. And then what happened was that the deck actually disappeared. And I didn't play Modo back then, no Magic Online. And I remember that I posted a tweet, you can probably still find it, in March, I think, where I said, hey guys, this is my updated Band Miracles list. I think this is the best deck in the format. And people were laughing at me on Twitter. They were saying you're joking, nobody's playing Terminus anymore. What are you telling us? Is this a joke? And I meant it seriously, actually. So I was really surprised.
They angered the beast.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm fine. If people don't want to.
That's what a beast would say.
I'm fine. I'm happy if I reserve this deck just for myself and nobody else plays it. I have an advantage because of my deck choice. I don't mind that at all, honestly. So, but I was surprised. I was so surprised that people don't pick up on it. So let me get back to the question. Snowco, what's the difference? Okay. So this deck is built very similarly to Snowco. The big difference is that I have no black mana, right? Because Snowco does usually also not have red cards in the main deck, so the big difference is no black mana. No black mana, what does that mean? That means no Abrupt Decay, no Dead of Winter, and maybe no Leovold.
No Plague Engineer, yeah.
Yeah, Plague Engineer is not a main deck card, but we can talk about sideboard cards too. But let's talk about main deck cards first. So it's basically these three cards. And I think the most important of these three cards by far, by a mile, is Abrupt Decay / Assassin's Trophy, whichever one you prefer, which is a versatile answer to everything. And I wanted to try it out too, because on paper it sounds really good, right? You have suddenly an answer for Sylvan Library and for Arcanist, for Dreadhorde Arcanist. Yeah, it's so important to have. At first it seems so nice, right? You have this versatile answer that can just answer Sylvan Library just like that, which I just told you is the bane of the existence of Band Miracles. And then you also have an uncountable answer for Dreadhorde Arcanist, for Oko, which is also a huge problem if it resolves. So it seems great, right? And it is actually a pretty good card, of course. But the problem you're running into is that if you play Abrupt Decay and you play Swords to Plowshares and you play Dead of Winter, you lose a lot of percentage points against decks that don't really rely on permanence. And that's what I realized. And if you add Abrupt Decay and you cut Swords to Plowshares, your win percentage against Delver will drop massively, because a 1 mana answer is just half the price, right? So you have two options there. Either you overload your deck with good answers to permanence, but you will lose to the decks that don't care about permanence against non-land permanence, I guess. Or you just don't play Abrupt Decay. And I think the second option is just better, because it makes your mana better. It makes your overall matchups better, I think. And there's a very good alternative to Abrupt Decay, which is just playing more Force of Wills, which is what I'm doing. That the logic behind it is that I am ready to 2-for-1 myself to stop a Sylvan Library. So I don't have to play black mana. I don't have to pay 2 mana for the Abrupt Decay. And I can just play cards like Jace or Archmage Charm to recoup the card disadvantage later. Or Sylvan Library, for example, myself. And I found that to be a way better plan, actually, to beat Sylvan Library. And you gain a lot of percentage points again against all the decks that don't really care about Abrupt Decay and Swords. So I think it's straight up better to play Band Miracles than 4-color Snow.
You make it sound like Abrupt Decay is a trap.
Oh, yeah, Abrupt Decay is a trap. And maybe I exaggerated a little bit, because there is some matchups, I guess, where Abrupt Decay is so important that, of course, your matchup with Snow is better. I think one of them might be Death in Texas, for example, where handling an Etterweil is so important. But these are few and far in between. And I think overall, you're just better off playing Band Miracles. And another thing I want to touch on is the comparison between Terminus and Jet of Winter. And I think it's not even close. I think Terminus is just so much more powerful, especially, of course, with Mystic Sanctuary. If you just watch any videos of me, any creature matchup, it always feels insane when you just have a Brainstorm in your hand and a fetch land on the table and the Terminus in your graveyard. You can, at any point in the game, for 2 mana, just kill all the creatures.
Yeah, that is ridiculous. Yeah.
At instant speed, it feels like cheating.
Hey, I said that already. Totally agree.
Or your deck or something.
I mean, compare that to Dread of Winter. It's just Dread of Winter is a joke in comparison.
Dread of Winter is a really underperforming card, in my opinion. It's either easy to play around, or like you need to have the right snow permanence, and it just looks really clunky and awkward.
So yeah, my opinion is play Band Miracles, don't play Snowco.
I want to actually touch on I liked your idea of saying Force Negation kind of takes the place of Abrupt Decay, because in the abstract it sounds kind of weird, but it makes sense. But I think an undersung thing about the Forces is being free is so big. It really can't be understated how powerful it is. I actually think Force of Will is the best card in the format, which is probably it's pretty out there, because people will say Brainstorm is, but I think Force of Will's got to the point where it's the best card in the format. And you're just doubling up even further on that, and I really like it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it gives you so much flexibility, since you can always use it. You can tap out and still use this card. And that's also the reason why I have 2 Jaces in there. And also told you that the flex slot should be a 2-for-1. It's so important that you don't run out of cards at the same time. But I also wanted to say, if you force a card that costs 3 or more mana, like let's say an Oko, it's actually an advantage for you. That's how it is, how I see it these days. Why do I see it that way? Let's say there was a card that drew 3 cards for 3 mana. I think that would be a fair legacy card. I think there is even like Painful Truth. Okay, it costs 3 life too, but there are these cards and they're not even everywhere. So I think it's fair to say that Oko is better than drawing 3 cards. Would you force a card that draws 3 cards? Would you force Ancestral Recall? Of course, you're always happy to force it. Or not happy, I guess, but you would always do it, because it saves you a card. And I see it the same way. If you force an Oko, it pulls you ahead, even so you lose a card. It might sound counterintuitive, but if you then resolve your own Oko or your own force, your own Jace instead, it pulls you so much ahead.
Yeah, I agree. This is why I think that Force of Will is so ridiculously powerful now, is because in the past, like going down on cards was a death knell. You can't do it forever because there just wasn't the same kind of engines. But now mana is worth so much more than card advantage, or at least it used to be in the past. So yeah, like trading 3 mana for a card is an exchange you're very happy to do very often, especially when you have such powerful follow-ups like you do with Jace. Like when you have Jace and you just slam it and you have like multiple Force of Wills in your hand or Force of Negations, you kind of feel invincible. So yeah, totally agree again.
That actually takes me back to an article that Javier Dominguez wrote, I think half a year ago or so, about Legacy, you know. Yeah, Javi, like MPL player, but also he won the Legacy GP Paris 2014. He's like super invested in Legacy. And he wrote about exactly that phenomenon in Legacy that has happened ever since like the most dominant cards in the format got printed, that we by now are sitting in a card and mana economy where it's very much worth it to force something that you wouldn't have forced before, just like from, you know, how the way the games have played out, because the cards are so powerful and they snowball so quickly, you know, like Dreadhorde Arcanist or Okos. Like if you get to untap with your Oko and stuff, it's so much more powerful that in order to stop it, you are very willing to give up a card on that. And I think we might actually like link that article in the show notes section, because I think at the time the article didn't get the attention it deserved because it was very visionary in how Legacy would actually develop. And Javier already saw this right away, and he took his time to write about that, even though, like, you know, for him, I guess Legacy is just like his hobby, and like Standard and everything else is his job.
And he still managed to write an article which is like visionary and ahead of its time. He's the best player for a reason, I guess. But
yeah.
Oh yeah.
We want to see Marc go up against Javier in the near future. But yeah, that's really cool to hear. Marc, by the way, just like a random question: do you actually offer coaching for people? Because like after this episode, maybe a lot of people are gonna try to pick up the deck.
So far, actually, nobody ever asked me for coaching. I guess I helped out some friends who picked up the deck. Just played a couple of matches with them on Discord. There's actually one funny story which happened not too long ago, actually. I think you know the streamer Magus of the Moon. He actually qualified for this Legacy finals that can qualify you for the MOCs. And he actually made it until the finals, where he got beat on time with a board that would actually win against Daniel Gürtchen. And yeah, I just gave him the deck. I played like 5 or 6 matches with him. He picked it up really fast, and he just crushed. Like, it was insane.
Sounds like you need to get some coaching. I mean, give.
People are gonna need some Pemmin coaching. Pemmin is your nickname. Honestly, I still don't know why, but okay, that's actually like totally unrelated to what we're discussing. So I'm gonna leave that out.
No, don't leave it out. I like to say something about it. Like, Pemmin is a really cool character from the Magic history, right? And there's actually he never got the printing. Maybe if Wizards is listening, please print Pemmin. Pemmin Riptide Survivor.
Oh, okay. I thought he was just like on Pemmin's Aura and that's it.
Oh no, he's a legendary wizard. He's a Riptide Survivor, and he is actually the flavor text on Stifle is actually a citation from Pemmin.
Is that, if I wanted your opinion, I would have told you what it was?
That is exactly it. That's what Pemmin said. He's a smart guy, so I like him.
Oh, he's a really cool guy.
He is, and the name is actually funny where it came from. It's from Pemmin's Aura. And the idea was that if you sort the letters of Pemmin's Aura differently, it's I am Superman.
And for those who don't know, Superman is a nickname of Morphling, which used to be one of the most influential creatures in Magic, basically. And Pemmin's Aura is an aura or enchantment that basically grants a ton of the Morphling abilities, right? That's how it works.
That is exactly correct, but these days, since it can untap for 1 blue, it's not really used for fighting as Morphling used to be. It's just used to produce infinite mana with a creature that produces 2 or more mana.
Interesting. Okay, now I'm actually glad I asked you about the origin of your nickname. That's pretty cool. So I think you made a really good case for why you like your deck over Snowco. Are there any problematic permanents that you hate facing, like, you know, Dr. Saver's playgroup is asking? I think you already mentioned that like Doomsday as a whole is kind of scary, but you got a really good game plan against that. And Sylvan Library is really good and like one of the major considerations for you. Are there any other permanents, maybe even like dedicated sideboard hate that people bring in that you feel they give you the biggest, like, okay, straight out, which cards give you the biggest problems, especially post sideboard?
Okay, so I guess there's a top 4 list of cards that give me the biggest problems. So the first card is kind of more like a group of cards, I guess. It's like Careful Study or Faceless Looting, because it means my opponent is playing a graveyard strategy, and both Hogak and Dredge are really terrible matchups. So that's on place 4. On place 3 would be Doomsday, because it's just beats you if you don't have Archmage Charm. So we already mentioned that. On place 2, Sylvan Library. Sylvan Library is so problematic that again, if it resolves game 1 against the creature deck, if they resolve it game 1, or also on the Snowco Mirror, I guess, you will lose. Almost always. It's just insane. So that's place 2. And then on place 1, and it is a distant place 1, it's by far the scariest card you could ever face with Blunt Miracles, Cloud Post.
I played some Cloud Post yesterday. I didn't face any Blunt Miracles though. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the Blunt Miracle's not played that much, as I said before. I'm surprised, honestly. But yeah, Cloud Post is... I almost just want to concede and save my time if my opponent starts with Cloud Post on turn 1. You just don't usually have the tools to beat them fast enough. There are draws. Actually, at the GP, I played against Cloud Post, and I beat them one game. I actually won the match there. And I beat them one game by just playing turn 3 Oko, Elk, and killing them, and having like, I think 3 forces back then to counter absolutely everything they tried to set up. So that's how you can win, but that happens so rarely.
I was going to say 8 forces will help a lot. Like,
yeah, but then they have like, they just need to have like
one
Cloud Post, and then maybe a Glimmer Post, whatever, and they're so close already. Maybe they have like Grim Monolith, and they are so close always to just casting Ulamog, and you can't counter. I mean, I guess you can counter Ulamog, but it will still exile to permanence. And they just have so many must counters usually that if any of those resolve, like Ugin or you name it, you will just lose. So this strategy is very unlikely. And then actually back in the days, there was a second strategy, and that was trying to ramp up and get a timely and treat the angels. So there was one game on that specific GP actually where my opponent hardcast an Emrakul and I still won because I made 6 angels in response. I could sack my board, all my lands, and then swing back with 6 angels to kill them.
That's sick. Nice.
Dude, that's incredibly flavorful. Yeah. I can actually hear the trumpets of the angels as they come crashing. And like you give up your entire kingdom, your realm, like everything dies in the final cataclysm, but the angels, they persist and they take the victory from the big spaghetti monster. Wow.
Yeah, that was
By the way,
that was fun.
By the way, what do you mean your matchup against graveyard decks is bad? I'm looking at your sideboard and you have a one-off surgical extraction. Like, how can they ever win,
There's
man?
2 rest in peace as well.
Okay, never mind.
So actually, I increased the number of graveyard cards. So the problem with these graveyard strategies is clearly, if I look, I also have a chart where I see how much I play against which deck. And that chart is mostly there to show how often I bring in specific sideboard cards. Because I actually hate sideboard cards that you only bring in like 5% of your matches or something. And the anti-graveyard sideboard cards are, from the whole sideboard, are the cards that I bring in the least. And that really sucks, honestly. And for a really long time, I only had 1 Rest in Peace and 1 Surgical, just exactly for that reason. But the win percentage against Hogak is pretty bad if you can't find the Rest in Peace. And the second Rest in Peace, I realized, makes your post-board games really favored. Like, I think in post-board games against Hogak with double Rest in Peace and Surgical, I have to be at least 70% actually, something like that. If you cut 1 Rest in Peace, it drops down significantly. Why? Because, again, game plan. Your game plan is to ponder, brainstorm, whatever, just to find those rest in peace. And you will just throw away cards along the way, just force everything they play. You will go down on cards and they will eventually overwhelm you if you can't find that rest in peace. And by doubling the number of rest in pieces, I increased the win percentage against Hogak by a lot. But at the same time, it decreases my overall win percentage against all the other decks because I have to dedicate a slot which is almost useless against most other decks.
Cool. It makes sense as well because it's a card you need to find early. It's not like Shark Typhoon and the Reclaimer matchup we were talking about earlier, or like Archmage's Charm against Doomsday, where you often have a bit more time in this kind of matchup because you're Force of Wills. But against Hogak, the Force of Wills are not stellar, and so you really need to find Rest in Peace for turn 2 or turn 3. So an extra copy can go a long way, more than some other things.
Yeah, definitely, and it's the only way you beat them usually.
Yeah. Where does Allosaurus Shepherd fall on this list? You didn't mention it, but you've complained about the card a few times on stream.
Yeah. I hate that card. So usually my elf matchup was Terminus in the deck, and these days with Ice Fang, so they can't beat me down. I have Terminus. I will eventually win the late game, and my win percentage against elves has been absolutely fine, above 80% for sure.
And then the dinosaurs came. Rah.
No. Still, even with 4 dinosaurs in the deck.
Yeah.
I
Cool.
think my win percentage is above 80%. Probably not if I play against Julian, but against an average elves player on the
like me.
Then it's actually 90%.
on the leagues, it's about 80%.
Yeah.
Obviously, it will go down if I play against Julian. I can't believe I have 80% there. I don't think so. But the thing why I complain about Allosaurus Shepherd is that there are the 20% basically that I lose are always games where Allosaurus Shepherd comes down. I look at my hand. I have 3 forces there, maybe a Brainstorm and a Ponder, but no white cards to handle the Allosaurus Shepherd. And then I'm just digging for Swords and Terminus, and if I can't find them in like 2 or 3 turns, I just lose because I cannot do anything. So these games that I lose against elves, they feel so bad because I wouldn't have minded a strong elf that gains card advantage, which would boost the win percentage of elves. I have no problem with that. Like a very strong card where like, oh my god, and now they draw 2 extra cards and it's so scary and stuff. But this card just says you can't interact, and that makes it for me unfun, honestly. Of course, I lose against it, so that's also part of why it's unfun for me, but just the games it promotes are not the kind of games that I enjoy, and I don't always need to win. I enjoy, for example, also play against Delver even if I lose, because they're very interactive games usually, and against elves, again, I have a good win percentage. You can even lose if they don't have Allosaurus Shepherd, for sure. You're highly favored then, but the games with Allosaurus Shepherd are often very uninteractive.
Cool.
Yeah, like I said, the card, it feels like the most stupid card I've ever played with that has not been banned yet. I mean, obviously stuff like Flash and other stuff is like even more stupid, but that stuff's banned. And Allosaurus Shepherd, it follows the pattern of you can't, which we've gone down a little bit over the last couple of years. And it feels, I don't know, man, it feels a little bit wrong that a card as blunt as this exists, even though it basically like gave a huge boost to one of my favorite decks in the format. But I can't phrase it any other way than saying that the card is stupid. But it does. Like the very fact that it itself is uncounterable, and it not only makes your elves uncounterable, but all your green spells as well. It's like, I don't know, it's pretty over the top. I'd rather play more intricate games, I always talk about how I want like advantages to be more granular, more smaller in Legacy, and this card is the plain opposite of that. It's like, comes down, you can't do anything about it on the turn it comes down, and like it's not so much about the Miracles matchup, but more about Delver, especially in the first game when they tap out and you literally know they're dead on board. There's literally no card they can do anything here, and that actually happens quite often, especially like on turn 3 or stuff.
I've kind of loved it. I think maybe it's just because I like broken stuff. I'm coming to terms with that. I've always been like a control person. I love playing that, but I've found that I just like playing broken stuff. So
I don't mind broken stuff.
Yeah.
I just mind uninteractive stuff.
Yeah,
but
no,
okay.
I get your complaint about it. I just like punishing Delver tapping out. I love it. I love it so much. So
I guess that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I guess before the show we shortly talked about whether we should touch the question about bannings in Legacy. Maybe we can talk about that shortly at this point.
Okay, cool.
Because I have a very simple opinion about it. So my opinion is always to have as many cards in a format as possible. That's why I play Legacy in the first place. If I wanted a narrow format with a narrow amount of card pool, I could play Standard or something, but that's not what I want to do. I want to just have access to everything, and I just love that. And I understand that sometimes bannings are necessary because one deck is so oppressive that there is no deck that has a good win percentage against it, and I think that was true with Breach, for example, so I'm glad that card got banned. But in general, I think as long as you have a healthy meta game and no deck dominates in a sense that it really has like a good matchup against everything, I think you should really consider not banning stuff, because it will also make people unhappy who bought that card. They love their deck, and I think that has so many disadvantages to banning cards that I would only do it in a real emergency. And Wizard used to do it like that, but they really changed their policy, and I'm always praying that doesn't come to Legacy, this very aggressive banning strategy, because I think it would be really unhealthy for our format. If you would ask me, Mark, if you had to ban some cards from Legacy, which one would be on top of your list? So, first of all, I would not like to ban anything from current Legacy, but if I had to ban something, on top of my list would be cards like Plague Engineer, there would be cards like Allosaurus Shepherd, there would be cards like Veil of Summer. All these cards, in my opinion, promote uninteractive, unfun gameplay. They all, for example, they all kind of kill some specific archetypes. Like Veil, have you seen Hymn to Turret since Veil is in the format? Not really. Then also cards like Plague Engineer really mess with creature strategies like goblins, which I think is really a shame, because it's so nice to have these creature strategies be available. And if you print cards that just soft ban decks, I think that's really not healthy. So I would consider banning these cards, but not for power level reasons, but for just diversity and fun reasons.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, especially since you mentioned that you would, if you had to, right, ban stuff for not power level, but gameplay reasons, I guess. And I think that's a common pattern that has happened lately, that stuff... I mean, I always think about Gitaxian Probe, where I feel like Gitaxian Probe is probably okay, but it just like promotes a playstyle that wasn't really very fun for a lot of people. And then when, I don't know, I wonder if that's something that Wizards is looking into more in the future, but yeah, that's just like my thoughts on that.
So again, I would not ban anything. I think none of these cards are so unfun that you should ban them. But for Gitaxian Probe is a really, really good example. I think that card was so unfun. It took away the element of you having to figure out what your opponent has in their hand. And of course, it made games where you just had Gitaxian Probe into Cable Therapy, take 3 Brainstorms from their hand and just not be in the game. So that it just promoted unfun playstyle in a so heavy way that is actually my favorite ban in the history of Legacy.
Do you like it even more than a ban of Flash?
I do.
Okay, wow, that's a big statement. Awesome. So moving on from the ban things, because like we mentioned, we didn't really want to go too deep on that. We got a ton more listener questions. Dude, you are the kind of guest for whom we received by far the most listener questions. So I want to pay attention to the one that we put in the show notes here. Dino Cat, one of our listeners, asked a question for you. Who is favored in a Snow versus Snow Miracles match? So do you feel ahead when you're playing against Snowco?
Okay, thank you, Dino Cat, for this question. Also, thank you for everyone that submit this question. So I feel really honored and really like it's so great to have the community be interested and be supportive. I felt that ever since I started my stream as well. People just like to come in, they like to hang out. They're all so positive people in the Legacy community. That's my favorite part about the game is the community. That's also why I hated all the online stuff before Corona came along. I would never touch it because it's about the gathering, right? It's about the gathering, and that is the most important part for me, and I wanna really emphasize that. And that still is the case. It's more important than like some spike winning or some online tournaments. It's just the community. It's so great, and I enjoy it so much. So thank you for that, guys. Coming back to the question from DinoCat, I think it's really close because, as I said before, Abrupt Decay is actually good in that specific matchup because you cannot rely on your Sylvan Library resolving, which they actually can. So you have to, by all means, counter their Sylvan Library. But I think we are favored overall, and that is for two reasons. The first reason being Mystic Sanctuary, which is, I think, my favorite card in the deck. It's definitely my favorite card that got printed in the last couple of years. I love that card. It gives you so many options. The card that I put back on top the most by far is Ponder. So in the late game, when you need a top deck, you can look at 3 cards instead of 1, which is awesome. But the card that you want to put back in the matchup against Snow is, of course, Archmage Charm. Just Archmage Charm, draw 2, put it back on top, draw 2, put it back on top, draw 2, and you will very, very likely win that game. So that's the one axis we have, they don't. The second axis that we have is Jace, and Jace is the most important thing why we are favored in that matchup. It's not Abrupt Decayable. If you resolve it, it's very hard for them to handle, and if you keep it on the table for a couple of turns, you basically just win. There's 2 more things that make us favored. These are not as important as the one that I just mentioned, but I want to talk about them real quick. The one is the main deck carpet, of course. It's so good in all the blue mirrors, and I had my fair share of turn 2 Okos or turn 2 or 3 Uros then in
it's
play.
Disgusting.
Yeah, it's really good. And even in the late game, it's still good because it helps the other part of the puzzle, Shark Typhoon. They cannot handle Shark Typhoon game 1 if they don't have Red Blast usually. So if you resolve a Shark Typhoon, which most of the Snowco decks don't have, you also just win. They cannot beat that card.
Dude, you actually have, like, with your enthusiasm with which you talk about the deck, you have me thinking about putting this together on Magic Online right now. That's amazing.
When we see Julian playing Terminus,
I
don't know.
dude, I didn't talk about it too much, but when Miracles like became a deck, I think Mark, you and we were working on Miracles quite a lot, right?
Yeah. Julian played a lot of Miracles actually back in the day. I remember that we both played it at the GP. That was the GP where I got 9th place in France, right?
With no losses. Was it?
Yeah, it was
in Belgium actually. That close.
It's a great story.
That was Ghent, yeah.
Oh, it was Ghent. Yeah, that's true.
That was where your opponent wanted to draw into day 2 because you were both like 6-0-2, I believe.
Yeah, he was really happy. He was like, I played like 10 GPs already. This is the first time that I make it to day 2. And it's so great. And I was like, if we draw now, we basically can't really make it to top 8 anymore. You would have to win 6 straight matches on day 2. If we play it out, then one of us has a shot with 5-1. And I think he wasn't really thinking about top 8ing this event. So he was like looking at me as if I were crazy. And I still feel bad, sorry. I still feel bad. I think it's just I had to take that decision. And I really wanted to have that guy on day 2. But I think overall, for both of us, actually, it was better to play it out. So we did. And I won. So dream crushed that poor guy. Sorry again. And there was a really unfortunate incident on day 2 where I had my win and in for the top 8. And my opponent wanted to go to the toilet, the restrooms. Yeah, during that time, a friend of mine was basically talking to me about magic-related stuff, which is forbidden because I was sitting on the table, and everything that is about magic while you're sitting at the table is not allowed. It's counted outside existence, so I immediately got a match loss for that. I think it was very fair to give me a match loss because I actually did talk to that guy about magic-related stuff. I didn't know back then, but it costed me the top 8. I got 9th place.
Harsh.
That's you're one of the few people who actually didn't lose a match, like actually lose a match the entire weekend, but still didn't make the top 8. You won a GP later, so redemption, #redemption, I guess. Okay, cool. Moving on, there's another question from DinoCat. DinoCat sent us a couple of questions. Do you have any tips for a relative newcomer playing your list? Is there like just a couple of rule of thumbs, like to take away the I don't know, the scare of playing a deck like this?
Okay, so I think it's a really fun deck to pick up because you will have a steep learning curve. You have to be aware that you might be losing a lot in the beginning, but the fun part is that will change. You will realize it with every matchup you play. It is very important. The first thing that you should have is look what are the like 5 or 10 most played decks on Magic Online, and actually have a sideboard plan for that. I should do that if I want to help out the beginners, publish a sideboard plan, because that is one of the easier things to just write down, and it will immediately bump your win percentage if you know what to side in and side out. Because in this deck, again, because of Brainstorm and Ponder, it is so important to sideboard correctly, because every single action card matters. Because if you count the number of action cards actually in the deck that actually do something, compared to like Force of Negation, Ponder, Brainstorm, Arcum's Astrolabe, Swords to Closures, Terminus, Sylvan Library, none of these cards can win the game. All the lands can't win the game, so you have a really low amount of cards that actually do anything. So it's so important to sideboard correctly, to know what you can side out and what you can't side out. So that would be my first and most important thing. If you start playing the deck, have a sideboard plan. And then as much as gameplay goes, so one thing I always tell every beginner, like 5 times a match, remember that your fetch lands can fetch Mystic Sanctuary. People tend to forget that a lot, and if you are not used to having Mystic Sanctuary in your deck, this is a common mistake, that people lose a game where they could just have put Terminus on top and just easily cruise to win, and instead they didn't. Or also in the late game where you're like, I need the top deck again, put your Ponder on top. Don't forget about that. That is really, really important.
Oh, that's some very valuable advice. I really like that. And if you will take the time to write a sideboard guide, I think people will totally like be super into that. So if you ever have the time, I think that will be a huge help in promoting this kind of archetype.
Especially because you do some weird stuff, which I like. I mean, I say weird. It was weird to me, but you side out a Terminus against Rugdelver, which to me was like, wow, I did not expect that. But then it just plays out well. So maybe I'll leave that. You don't have to answer if you don't want to, but leave it for your sideboard guide. You can explain.
Okay, I just give it.
Give a little recommendation
there. I had the 3rd Terminus in the sideboard, and I figured that against Rugdelver, 3 Terminus is actually too many because it's a situational card. And then now I went down to 2 Terminus. So back then I didn't side in the 3rd one. Now I went down to 2 Terminus in the main, having none in the sideboard. And I actually sided out 1 lately, but I think it's wrong.
Okay, fine.
Just keep the 2 Terminus. 2 is the perfect number.
Never mind then. Yeah.
My feeling.
Cool.
Yeah, but you're definitely correct. When I had 3 Terminus, I didn't side in the 3rd one, which is also a huge part of the reason why I cut it. If I wouldn't side it in against a creature matchup, other than Death and Taxes and Elves, then why is it even there in the first place, right?
Yeah, I think I saw one of your streams where I actually cited one of those out, and I was also like really impressed with that. But it's cool to see that you changed your mind on that as well.
I just wanted to say one more quick thing. So if you see me doing crazy stuff, don't always think, wow, he's next leveling everyone. I'm also just sometimes trying things out. Like, for example, in the tournament that I played this weekend, I think I got top 4 despite playing Hull Breach and Stifle in my list, and not because I played those cards, which were like the tech choices for the tournament, but they were actually wrong.
Oh, awesome. We're actually going to talk about Hull Breach in a short moment here. I want to finish 2 more questions that we got. We got our friend Sam Dams, Fenris Cloud, sent us another question, and surprise, it's about Infect. He's asking, how does Marc feel about the matchup versus Infect? To me, it feels heavily favored for Infect and a good matchup, but I want to hear from the master himself. So, Callum, how does it go? No, seriously, Marc.
Wow.
No, if you like, Callum can definitely do his evaluation. What do you think, Callum?
I think I'll let you take over in a second, but I think the matchup is incredibly complex, and it's probably actually quite even between like equal skill players, is what I would assume.
Yeah, I think I can agree on that. I'm definitely overall have a positive win percentage against it, but it's really that might sound a bit cocky, sorry, but it's really sometimes hard for me to judge win percentage, as is for a lot of the players that play a lot of Legacy, because you're not always playing against the player that played the deck for like 100 years and knows every in and out. So if you judge a matchup fairly, you would have to judge it with similar player level. And I think you're pretty close to the 50-50 that Callum just said. Even so, I'm way above that. The reason why I think the matchup isn't as bad as people think it is that that it's so complex. It's so important to know when you have to set up your terminus, when you have to sort. Like, one of the easier rules, which I think by now most people understand, is don't sort the infect creature in combat, right? If they play a pump spell on a creature which is not lethal, don't you dare playing Swords to Plowshares if they can still protect it with Vines of the Vastwood or a different protection spell, because what will happen then is they pay 2 more mana, they protect it, and they kill you in the same turn. These things happen, so always kill it at the end of their turn. And this is a simple rule, of course, but there's definitely more to that in the matchup. You just have to know when you can take the damage and when you can't take the damage. And of course, there's also, like, since I added the Sylvan Library, that one is huge. You can just freely pay all the life, right? So that helps a lot. And also the Ice Fang Quartals help a lot, because in earlier days, the matchup was actually unfavored for Miracles before Ice Fang Quartal, I think, and before Shark Typhoon, because the problematic card was the Inkmoth Nexus, which had flying. But now, if you have an Ice Fang in play, they usually don't have a lot of removal. It's really tough for them to win.
Awesome. So yeah, I think Infect used to be one of those decks that traditional Miracles struggled more with, but I can see how the cards you mentioned not swung it around, but made it rather evenish. I guess that means we're going to have a 1st to 10 series between you and Sam coming up to set up.
Oh, yeah, I was about to say money match.
Magic should have that, by the way. I watch a lot of Brood War, like, StarCraft 1, and that's a very common thing where streamers, they have they set up a match arena, and then for like a week people can donate to that, and then they play the match and the winner takes all the money. Cool. And it's a really hype, really cool thing, and I always look forward to those. And if we could have something like that in Magic, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm going to work a little bit on that to bring something like that in the future, because that would be really cool. Maybe not like a single best of one, because there's too much variance in that, but something like, 5 matches or something.
Yeah, or maybe just 1 or 2 hours of content. Single elimination, 8 players, something like that would be fun, because that would mean that they cannot just skew their sideboard, because people by now know what deck I'm playing.
That's true.
I'm not changing my deck usually, so they can just if you want to beat Band Miracles, you can.
That's a really good point. Maybe you either do it like an 8-man, like you mentioned, or you have to make it so that people need to play the list that they played with in the last big tournament or something like that prevents the insane metagaming that would otherwise probably be going on. That's a good point. I mean, you could also show up with an entirely different deck, so there's that, but then that takes a little bit away of the excitement of having a certain matchup play out. But that's something to keep in mind. Actually, I kind of want to work on that for the future. That would be great.
Cool, invite me.
Yeah, same. Actually,
yeah, I think a lot of people would love to see
Anurag is doing something similar. I think he's actually just doing that. It only popped into my head. I think he's doing it for subscribers in his Discord. And I could be saying this wrong. I've just seen him stream one last week. I'll check it out, but yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, check it out. I saw that too, and I actually asked on Twitter what is going on here. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I didn't get an answer. Okay. I think he gets so many Twitter posts these days. Yeah. Anzi, the famous AnziD.
Let's find out.
But yeah, I would also be interested in what's going on there.
I think the way what Anorak does is that he basically has 8 players and they play like a mini tournament, and you broadcast that or record it and then later put it on YouTube. What I had in mind is like the thing that people do in Brood War, where you have the community, chip in the money because they want to see 2 specific players go up against each other and fight it out. And that's part of the draw for that. That's a slightly different concept, I guess.
I think it sounds cool.
In general, I want to do an episode on like third-party content in the future, so that's probably like too deep here. But I think like this whole COVID situation, for as much as it has hurt, paper play, I think it more than anything ever in the history of Magic before has accelerated, all these third-party initiatives, like, all the stuff that Anorak is doing, that like all the other organizers are doing, that MTG Melee, like I think we wouldn't have seen MTG Melee in like a non-COVID scenario, or at least not this fast. And it's really cool that the community as a whole, like not even Wizards, but even like all the third parties, have put in the resources, the time and the work to create a new ecosystem for playing Magic competitively, even though right now it's just like, online, and that excludes a huge part of the community. And like you mentioned, the gathering aspect of Magic. But the acceleration we saw in growth, for like tournament organizing, third-party content, that's just like a really cool thing that's going on, and I'm happy that the community has stepped up there.
Oh, definitely. And I also wanted to contribute to that. I'm actually right now doing a paper Magic league via webcam. We called it the Bavarian Legacy Masters, because originally it was planned as a real-life event in Bavaria. But now it's kind of worldwide. We have insane, cool, altered promo cards for the winners. And I actually played a match last weekend against the Pro Tour Top 8 and GP winner Michael Bonde on stream. So if you're interested in that, you can watch it on stream. It was Paper Magic. And that league is still going on. And who knows, maybe if people are interested, I'm going to do a follow-up even.
Are the VODs going to be on YouTube? Because, on Twitch, they're going to be eventually deleted. So if you want to export them to YouTube, then we can preserve that for the afterworld.
Yeah, I should maybe do that. Yeah, not yet.
Quickly, because they might be deleted after, I think, 2 weeks or something. But yeah, that's really cool that you do that. You also have like this really awesome prize, right? That altered brainstorm that somebody's going to take home.
So yeah, that's actually a really awesome prize. It's from my favorite alterist, Anders Schmidt. He's so overflown with alterations. I always ask him and he's like, no, I have so much work to do, I can't do it. And he's doing so much stuff. He's such a great guy. And he made the brainstorm with Jace on it, where Jace is brainstorming basically in style of the Ice Age brainstorm. And it looks so authentic. It looks like actually like a painting of Jace brainstorming. I would really love to win that card. I can't say it otherwise. I will be jealous on whoever wins this thing.
And maybe they can sell it back to you then.
Nah, it says champion on it, so I think it's deserved. And whoever wins it, please keep it. It's yours, and you earned it.
Good point. Yeah, I guess it would be awkward if you played with a card that says, "Hey, I'm the Bavarian Legacy Open champion," and then actually I only came 4th.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. No. That's
Awesome.
That's against my pride.
Okay, cool. So before we move on, we have one more question from my friend from Austria, Peter Planck. I actually ran into him in Beijing last year. He's asking, Mark, what are your secrets for playing in tournaments, especially with regards, to staying healthy and keeping a good mindset? And I guess that primarily refers to paper tournaments, but it's also applicable to online tournaments.
Oh yeah, definitely. And if you have to play a long tournament with miracles, you gonna have to have some stamina. You have to stay concentrated all day. There's no free wins. You will always have long matches. You need to play fast to not get into time. So it's really a grind. I love it. You need to love it. If you don't love that, don't play miracles on huge tournaments. It won't make it for you. But if you love the grind, if you like to grind out every game, just do it. And of course, exactly what you said, you have to stay healthy. So what I usually do if I have a long tournament ahead of me these days, online tournaments, I go jogging outside for like not too long, 20 minutes or something. So I had some movement. Then I have a huge bottle of water. I'm drinking a lot of water, and I'm walking around between rounds, doing also some exercises just to keep the blood flowing. And these things, it's not just it's really important. Actually, it's really important. Otherwise, you can't make it like on 8 or 9 hours in a row. And then also eat something healthy. Towards the end of the event, you can also eat some sugar. But don't do it like at the beginning, because your blood sugar will fall down, and you will realize it if you play a long event. These things are actually important. And then, of course, stay focused if you need to. What I mean by that is, if you're like, the way that I play it is, if I'm out of contention for like top 8 or the big prizes, I'm playing more relaxed, I guess. And if I'm really still in contentions, I really try to get myself into the game and really don't think about anything else, and get in the zone, I guess is what they say, right? That's also really a huge part of playing a complex deck like Miracles.
That makes a lot of sense, right? I think especially with regards to paper tournaments, something that I've always tried to stay away from is when people try to give you all their bad beat stories between rounds. I'm these days kind of abrasive about that. Like, I cut them off, and like, I don't tell them I don't want to hear your story, but I think it comes across pretty well. And I think when I see you at big paper tournaments, you also seem like super relaxed between rounds. You don't feel like the need to talk over every single situation with somebody else again and hear their opinion. At least that's the impression I got from you when you won Bologna.
Oh, definitely. And I think that it's so important to stay positive. I wanna shout out to the whole community exactly what you said, Julian. Please, if you are at the tournament, talk about your successes. Talk about what you won. Don't let everybody know your bad beat story. Like, I have an example for you. We talked a lot about the green-white reclaimer matchup that I had in the top 8 this weekend, which I then took down. It felt good. I had a strategy. I had a plan. We talked about it. Feels good talking about it. In the semifinals, which I actually lost, I had disastrous games where I just flooded out, where I drew 3 times as many lands as I drew spells, these things. But is it useful to talk about that? Can you do anything about it? No. Does anybody want to hear about it? No. It just will make people feel bad. So if you are at huge events, try to stay positive. Try to make positive messages. It's really more comfortable for anyone.
I'm going to +1 that with a very, very big +1, because there is a in-joke which has been for years now with my London friends. They all ask me, they all try and tell me about bad beats because they know how much I dislike it. I really, really, really don't like hearing about bad beat stories. And now they just constantly come up. And it's also about like asking what your record is and like going, oh, I'm X1, blah, blah. And so, no one wants to hear how you kind of missed your 3rd land drop and stuff. It happens all the time. So, but yes, do say the cool plays you made, because in every game, there's always some really cool stuff you did. Yeah, focus on the positives, definitely.
Cool.
Awesome. So before we move on to our last set of questions, I put those into the end because they were not directly related to stuff we were talking about earlier. I want to just, quickly touch on what seemed to be the most influential cards from, judging by the first results you got over the weekend, from Commander Legends. And those are basically Hullbreacher, Court of Cunning. And I also want to talk a little bit about Court of Grace, because I know that Mark, you used to be pretty excited about the white card. So why don't we start with Hullbreacher? I think that has been, can we call it the breakout card of the weekend? Because we've seen that card everywhere in almost like half the decks, people trying to make it work, doing some really broken stuff with it. Callum, Mark, you've played more than I did this past weekend. What have your impressions been of Hullbreacher?
I wouldn't call it breakout. Like, it's been played a lot, and the price is currently insane on MTGO. It's like 100 tickets or something. But that's a separate issue. But people are playing it a lot, but it doesn't seem to be like completely insane. So Mark tried it in his Miracles deck. I think people will try it in Snow a bit as well. But it just doesn't like... It's just a very good card, and it is quite a build-around card as well. I think it's more of a build-around than people expected. And as just a kind of gotcha card, people will also learn quite quickly how to play around it. It is quite vulnerable, like it's got 2 toughness. It is just a creature without anything to help protect it. The flash is obviously a big deal, but it is dying to a lot of things. And so I think it's just going to be like a good card in the format unless some combo deck or some heavy synergy deck appears, because people have been 5-0ing with it in the Echo of Eons like Urza deck, which does seem like a natural fit. It seems very good there. I've been messing around with it. I streamed, I think it was yesterday. I'm really getting old and losing my mind. But I streamed with a pretty experimental deck playing Vision Schemes, which is a 2-mana instant. Each player draws 2 cards. And Arcane Denial, which is counter target spell. At the beginning of the next upkeep, you draw a card and your opponent draws 2 cards. Oh no, the owner of the spell you countered draws 2 cards. So you can counter your own things. And it's also using Days Undoing, which is a Time Twister, which ends the turn. But Mark was in the stream watching as well, and I had Twitch chat's help, because Twitch chat can do anything for you. They're just so smart and they're so clever and they're never wrong. And especially when you have Mark in the chat making suggestions. So we actually started the league 4-0 and just lost the last round to Tez. In this deck, it also has like fast mana, like Lotus Petals, 4 of them and 2 Chromox. And then it has a Commandeer, and then like usual Force of Wills and 2 Force of Negation. And the deck played out really well, actually. A lot better than I expected. And it kind of looks like a bit of a meme, but playing a turn 2 Hull Breacher to turn 3 Days Undoing is going to win the game. Almost always, assuming it resolves. Like, mind twisting your opponent to 0 and then making 7 mana and drawing yourself 7 new cards. When you have so much counter magic as this deck does, and more card advantage. So I think that'll be explored a bit more. I definitely will.
So I really enjoyed your stream, and it was really fun to watch. And I think I have some more comments about Hull Breacher. So
yeah.
I tried it out in my deck, thinking, oh, it's actually really nice to have a Hate Bear in the main deck that I can pitch to Force of Will, because it's really nice to have flexible blue cards because you can pitch them in the matchups where they are not good. And I was mainly thinking about matchups like Elves, actually against basically any combo matchup. Also is something, again, that I think about a lot, is Doomsday. And if they resolve the Doomsday, they actually need like at least 3 turns or even more until they can finally play their Oracle. Because one huge difference between the Hull Breacher and cards like Narset is that the Hull Breacher doesn't even allow you to draw the extra card on your opponent's turn, which is huge. So I was thinking that might be really cool, but what I didn't realize, or what I just realized when playing the card in the tournament, is that it's just a bad card in, like, I don't know, a very high percentage of your matches. Of course, this is just a very small amount of data for me, just this one event, but I also looked in the top 8 and I was like, okay, there's no match where I wouldn't side it out, no matchup where I wouldn't side it out. It's just it just has felt bad overall, because it's really specific. So what I'm getting at is, don't put Hull Breacher in your blue deck and expect it to be good overall. So for the fair blue decks, it's more like a sideboard card. But something I want to really touch on, and I think that is scary to say the least, is something I realized about Hull Breacher, is it's a better Splinter Twin. What do I mean with that? So you can play the Hull Breacher like a Splinter Twin creature, like the Pestermite for 3 mana, end of turn. But then the second part of the combo, which will always kill your opponent, I can explain why, but will basically always kill your opponent, is it's just the draw 7 card for 3 mana. And just slipped my mind, Callum. How's that card called?
Days Undoing.
Days Undoing, yeah, sorry. So, right, that's Days Undoing. So it's not a 4 mana enchantment that you need to put on your creature. It's just the 3 mana sorcery card that is also blue, so it's also pitchable. And what did I mean with it will win the game? Well, mind twisting your opponent and putting 7 Lotus Petals on the board and drawing 7 cards. I can't imagine many situations where that does not win you the game if you did build your deck correctly.
Yeah. And, this will sound silly to say, but when doing that felt way more strong than I imagined. And that now we're explaining it, it's like, wow, that's actually super broken. But doing it and then just because, as you said, you need to build your deck correctly. You need to draw into either removal spells or bounce spells or counter magic as well. But if you do that, it's so broken, like so crazily broken. So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, it's a new Splinter Twin deck basically. I mean, Splinter Twin wasn't good enough for Legacy. Many people have tried it out, but this is just better than Splinter Twin. And also both combo parts on its own are better than Splinter Twin, because the Hull Breacher can just blow out a random Jace activation or Brainstorm. It's a very, very good against the combo decks that can't handle it. So this part is a good part. So that's always when I evaluate combos, right? You need to evaluate the single parts. Are they good if you don't have the combo? And then they're both blue, so they're both pitchable. And the Days Undoing also combos very well, not only with Hull Breacher, but you will also play Narset in the same list, of course. So I think that Hull Breacher will see a lot of play in Legacy, yes, but only in dedicated decks.
Cool. I like the way you put it, because I didn't think of it like a Splinter Twin deck. But yeah, it's just mono blue Splinter Twin currently. But you can do some really cool stuff. Like you can play red for Burning Inquiry.
Or you can play white for Swords of Plowshares,
yes.
like I suggested many times when I was in chat.
I will definitely do that. I think that's the smart thing to do.
But Burning Inquiry, man.
Yeah, Burning Inquiry is like you make three tokens. It's more fun. Come on.
But wait, with Burning Inquiry, you draw 6 cards, right? Never mind. We'll kick this Mark guy out from this podcast. No. This is a Burning Inquiry.
You draw 3 cards and you net 2 mana.
Oh, but doesn't your opponent also draw 3 cards?
Yeah, but Hull Breacher stops them and makes tokens. So you draw the 3 cards, and then you net 2 mana as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We're actually going to kick Julian from this card.
So they discard 3 as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously good with Hull Breacher. I wouldn't disagree on that. But I think the combo itself is just strong enough. Just play 4 Hull Breacher, 4 Days Undoing, and just have the combo at the ready. And then the rest of the shell, as I like to do it, just play a normal control deck. Just play Swords of Plowshares, play Brainstorm, Ponder, all the stuff. I think maybe I should even try it myself. The deck just sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I'm pretty sure because what I was streaming yesterday was just mono blue, and I know that it's just like the first shell, the first idea, and you either want like red for Lightning Bolt or white for Swords of Plowshares, I'm sure. I currently have a list on Magic Online built to try next with Engulf the Shores, to try without them, which is like a 4-mana instant. You bounce all creatures equal to if the toughness is less than the number of islands you control. So it's a way to kind of like combo and then just bounce the whole board. So I want to try that. But yeah.
Maybe you could try a card that costs 6 mana, but you can sometimes cast it for 1 mana. It slipped my mind, but I think there is such a card.
It sounds pretty broken. I think that a card like that wouldn't exist. That sounds pretty broken, man.
But no.
But you gotta pick an awesome name for that kind of deck. If that actually becomes a thing, we can't call it like Twin 2.0. It's gotta have a better name.
Well, no, it can be Breach 2.0 because Breacher is.
Oh, that's
Breach
really
is
bad.
unbanned. Yes,
I guess
free Breach. But I think that if it is actually kind of competitive, I completely agree with Mark that it'll be with white with like 4 Swords of Plowshares and 2 Terminus. I think
there's a really good shot that will be a competitive strategy going forward.
Let's try it. Or you can play As Foretold with Wheel of Fate.
Sure, if you don't want to win, you can do that.
Oh, you're so I want to do silly stuff. But yeah.
Going back to silly stuff, what's actually the reasoning behind the commandeer that you included? Because I bet somebody in, the whole hashtag MTG Finance community was already looking at that.
That is purely 100% because the card is sweet.
I mean, that's how you broke a lot of stuff. Remember how you tried to make Shark Typhoon a thing and then it actually accidentally went from a meme to a deck?
I mean, there was some reasoning because when you're playing draw 7s, you're spending mana on drawing lots of cards. You're also playing these Words of Wisdom, which is 2 mana, you draw 2, your opponent draws 1. Vision Schemes, which is 2 mana, each player draws 2. And then obviously the Days Undoing is draw 7. You want to be able to use these extra cards. So I figured that there will be plenty of games where you don't have a Hull Breacher in play or your opponent has removal for it. So you want to be able to use these extra cards that you're generating for both players better than your opponent. So when you're just having more pitch spells is a way to put ahead in this kind of extra resource kind of games. So that.
Oh, interesting. Did you already max out on the other forces? The other 8 forces?
No, there's just 2 Force of Negation, but I think at least adding another one makes sense as well. So the Commandeer could be like another Force of Negation, but it's.
Yeah, what I just wanted to say is that I think Commandeer was really underrated before Force of Negation got printed. unfortunately, these days, Force of Negation is almost straight up better.
And for those who don't know what Commandeer does is it's an instant, a pitch count. It's not really a counter, right? It's you steal a non-creature spell, but I think if I remember correctly, you have to pitch 2
so
blue
you may
cards,
exile
right?
2 blue cards from your hand rather than paying its mana cost. And then you gain control of target non-creature spell. You may choose new targets for it. It costs 7 mana normally, which is exactly the amount of treasure tokens you make off Hullbreacher and Days Undoing as well. That is a twin situation. it's so perfect. Maybe after this I'll stream the white version. Well, actually tomorrow I'm going to try and stream the a blue-white version. Mark, if you have some ideas, definitely let me know.
Definitely. Also splash red for Red Blast, always.
Okay, we're doing 3 colors now. Okay.
I mean, it's not really 3 colors. You can always play the volcanic in the sideboard like I like to do. Maybe we should shortly touch on that. So there's 2 things that I strongly believe in Legacy. So I explained before why I think that the best decks in Legacy have and will always have Brainstorm, Ponder, and Force in them. And if that is the case, then the best card to answer that is actually Red Blast. So your deck should have Red Blast. Red Blasting a Brainstorm is just awesome. So, and it's so easy to splash Red Blast with fetch lands, right? So what I like to do is put the Volcanic into my sideboard. And maybe short words to that as well. The Volcanic in the sideboard, a lot of people always ask me about it. Is it worth the sideboard slot? And I am very, very sure that it is actually. The reasoning being that you would otherwise put a non-basic island into your main deck because you don't need the red mana for anything. It's a non-basic island that doesn't cast your Astrolabe. It's just a very, very bad island that can be wastelanded. And that matters in so many matchups that the percentage points you get in all those matchups accumulated definitely make up for the one card you put into the sideboard. And there's one more thing. The card in the sideboard is also good because there's certain matchups like Death and Taxes where you would like to go up like 2, maybe even 3 lands if you could. So every land you can put into your deck is just a bargain. And I just put it in every time I play those wasteland matchups as an additional land.
Makes sense. It was always a weird thing, like explaining why you're sideboarding in a volcanic island that doesn't cast any spells with the red side against Death and Taxes and stuff. Be like, I'm happy siding in a non-basic island, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Going back to quickly touching back on what we talked about earlier with regards to like tactics and strategy and stuff. That was one of the biggest eye-opening moments for me when I started learning like a couple of different decks in Legacy. When people who really understood their decks really well, they told me, okay, in this matchup you actually side out this and that basic land. Like, whoa, I would have never thought about that. And sometimes I feel like there's the danger of cool things where you want to, like Mark mentioned, you want to go to the next level and you want to do the smart thing. But I think at least historically in a couple of occasions with regards to certain matchups, that was actually like the right thing to do. And I think a lot of people don't think about that much. For example, with Elves, when I play against like really grindy matchups that don't attack my lands, I sometimes side out like a Cradle or even 2. And that's because that's just like my experience, that sometimes they just pile up in my hand and I can't even use them like as Dark Rituals because that's not how the matchup plays out. And I often get comments on my stream where people are like, whoa, I would have never thought about that. And I think that's always like when you can come to a deeper understanding where you take something into consideration. For example, like Mark mentioned, you just bring in the Volcanic Island against Death and Taxes just like as an extra land. And that's
I side out lands all the time, especially on the draw, because you have the extra card to draw into. Any decks that aren't pressuring your life total, I generally like to side out a land on the draw. It obviously doesn't apply to everything. There are combo decks don't want to do it as much, but yeah, it's definitely underappreciated what you can do with lands here and there.
Moving on to 2 other cards that we quickly want to touch on, and those are the 2 cards which we expected to at least be tried out in Legacy as opposed to the other 3 cards which probably won't be doing anything. And those are Court of Cunning and Court of Grace. The blue one for 3 mana, both of them make you become the Monarch. The blue one mills for 10 if you're the Monarch, and the white one gives you a 4/4 flying angel creature token if you're the Monarch. Otherwise, you're just going to get a 1/1 white creature token. But does the blue one actually do it? Mills for 2 cards. Okay, that's not too impressive if you're not the Monarch. How have you guys experienced those cards? Because I know that Mark was super high on Court of Grace for like a couple of weeks, but I think you've come down on the card a little bit, right?
So yeah, I was actually not high on it for a couple of weeks, but when I initially saw it, my first reaction was like, wow, this is insane. And the reason why I was on that reaction is like, I guess similar to Narset. It's a card that could just beat me on its own, like beat the control matchups on its own. So I tend to over-evaluate cards which are good against Band Miracles, is what I'm saying here. And that card is certainly good against Band Miracles. And so that's why I think I overvaluated it as first, because the problem with that card is obviously that you have a 4-mana card that takes a turn to get going. And in this turn it takes to get going, you are actually not supposed to lose the monarchy, which means you can't also take damage. And if you consider which games are the games where you can actually afford to play a 4-mana card and in the same time manage that your opponent can't do anything, can't win with a combo, can't attack you for 1 damage. These games are very rare, far in between, I guess, and only really occur in control mirrors. So I think it's just a card for control mirrors. But why did I think it was so strong? Because obviously a control deck can't really beat drawing 2 cards a turn and making a 4/4 angel. That's completely ridiculous. And if you want to beat on control decks, this card is great.
So is this something you would probably say consider for a deck like Death and Taxes?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. I mean, it has some anti-synergy with Talia, which is maybe a problem. But now that you say it, I think it sounds a lot stronger than Gideon, which are most of the Death and Taxes players have in the sideboard.
Yeah, I was wondering. Maybe it's something to be explored there, because actually I didn't see any Court of Grace over the weekend ever since the cards were released, but I saw a ton of Court of Cunning, and I know a lot of people are still brewing with Court of Cunning to make it work. Is that something that excites you? Because you talked about, right? I think you had it as a one-off in your experimental list, like in the flex slot.
Oh yeah, I have it currently in my list. Yes, I think it's as I said, it does some things which I want my flex slots to do. It generates card advantage. It's good against a certain combo deck, and so it does these things. And I still need to test it out a lot more, because of course there will be a lot of situations where you can't play it out. If your opponent, if you can't stop an Ice Fang Quartel end of turn and they have 2 mana open, you just can't play it out. So there will be a lot of situations where you can't play it out. And I suspect that overall the card is also in the control and the combo matchups worse than Servant Library. But I wouldn't want to have too many Servant Libraries, because that card is also slow, right? That's the same thing that I just said with Court of Grace, right? Servant Library is also slow. You need to have it in play for an entire turn until you can actually activate it. And that will be the same problem with all these Monarch cards. They are like super slow, grindy card advantage. So I think it's quite situational, but when you get there, it's super powerful, because it will not only draw you cards, it will also mill you. So you have your Auror in your graveyard, so you have targets in your graveyard for Mystic Sanctuary, which you hopefully don't mill all of them, so you can bring back spells. That's also important, and it's a win condition, right? There are some matchups where you're like struggling, to win, which is the reason why I put in the Shark Typhoon to go over the top. But this card could also be a card that goes over the top, because if you can protect your Monarch, your opponent is dead in like 4 turns because you mill 40 cards.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what the card is going to be capable of doing. I think there's some potential there, and it's probably the most likely of the cards to, if it's ever broken, that's probably going to be this one. But right now it seems okay, nothing crazy about it. Callum, have you been able to play with Court of Cunning?
I played a league with Rest in Peace, Energy Field, Helm, and I'm glad to say I never have to play it again for another 2 or 3 years and don't get like trapped into it. It's so bad, that shell. I'm sorry, I know there's loads of people who love that deck, but I just thought Court of Cunning is really good with Island Sanctuary. And our friend Francis Calper, the Lord, as we like to say, he had the idea, and he wanted to play 4 Island Sanctuary, 4 Court of Cunning in the Man Traders event. But Island Sanctuary is currently bugged on Magic Online. So it's a enchantment for 1 white mana. And at the beginning, you may skip your draw for your turn. And if you do, you can't be attacked by creatures unless they have flying and or island walk. So it's a really good curve. It's not good against Delver, but like a flip Delver, but that's about it. Nice Fanquattle, but you can curve turn 2 Island Sanctuary into turn 3 Chord of Cunning, and then the Chord of Cunning gives you your like extra land drop to then pull ahead until you can control the board. And this kind of shell is very good with Moat as well. Obviously, like Moat is already very good against Delver because of Arcanist and Oko, and all their threats apart from Delver are ground-based creatures. So I thought maybe this kind of blue-white pillow fort stompy thing might be good. I was even playing like 2 City of Traitors and stuff, but no, that wasn't very good. But like we mentioned on the podcast last time about with spoilers, I think it's still probably okay as a 1-2 of Endelver sideboards. And Peter White, who is Power 22, people might have run into him on leagues quite a lot. He's been posting. He posted a 5-0 a couple of days ago, and he's been doing very well with like Bant Chord of Cunning. He only has 2, but the deck is kind of built around it. So he has 4 Ice Fangs, he has 2 Chord of Cunnings, he has 2 Moats, and then he has like Source Plowshares, all the cantrips. It's similar to Mark's deck, honestly, but it's using Moat and Chord of Cunning a lot more. And he has like 2 old school counterspells in there. So if you want to check his lists out, it's Power22 MTG on Twitter. He said he hasn't played too much the last day or 2, but he was 8-0 with the deck so far. So yeah.
That's pretty cool. So is he using Chord of Cunning kind of like a chase, like a planeswalker, like a protect the green strategy?
Yeah, and he's just like, you just need 3 turns of protecting it, and then you mill your opponent out. Because the deck...
That's a lot faster than chase.
Yes, yeah. Like, milling 10 is obscenely fast. It's. I mean, you know how I feel about the Monarch already. And then when you have just like milling 10 on it, yeah. Especially with Moat. Moat is kind of an auto-win against a lot of decks. Again, like a deck with 4 Source Plowshares and Ice Fanquattles, you're going to be able to kill a Delver. And then if you stick Moat against Rug Delver currently, they can't beat it without like bolting you out as well. Elves can't beat it unless they have sideboard Assassin's Trophy.
Yeah, and the first game is pretty hard. Actually, I've seen some Elves lists play Reclamation Sage again, and people were speculating whether that's like the part that gives us trouble against, for example, Death and Taxes is usually like enchantments and sometimes artifacts. So maybe there's a world where Rec Sage comes back. I don't know.
But I do think it's worth trying Chord of Cunning with Moat. Moat is just good right now. It's 4 mana. It's expensive, but it's very high power level against Delver and a lot of other decks, really.
Okay, so I think those are the cards that are going to be the most interesting moving forward. 2 others that didn't really do anything over the weekend yet were Opposition Agent and Wheel of Misfortune, which I guess are the only other ones that were really considered for maybe having a big impact on Legacy. Yeah. And Wheel of Fortune is unfortunately bugged in the sense that it actually shows you what the opponent has chosen in secret. That's like
it's a really funny bug.
Stupidest bug.
that is an insane bug. I mean,
I mean, maybe they have fixed it because like just today they released basically an out of sequence update. Usually they update Magic Online on Wednesdays, but this week they did it on Tuesdays, and they mentioned that they fixed a couple of bugs. So maybe they fixed it. But when I saw a streamer play it, he was like looking at it and he was telling me, why do I see what my opponent chose? So yeah, and apparently Opposition Agent is also bugged. Rebel Cheap submitted a bug report to Magic Online earlier today because Opposition Agent should show you the content of the opponent's hand, but it doesn't. It's like it doesn't break the card, but it certainly makes it weaker.
I feel like Rebel Cheap is just like the curse, excuse my pun, on Magic Online because poor guy, he plays this Curse Stompy deck, which is very cool, and he's been doing very well with it, honestly. And so he's put 4 Opposition Agent in this deck. Just history on the other deck, though. So he plays Curse of Misfortunes, which is at the beginning of your upkeep, you search for a curse and you attach it to your opponent. And it's a curse itself for 5 mana. And Cruel Reality is like the win con for the deck. It's a 7 mana curse. And at the beginning of your opponent's upkeep, they sacrifice a creature or a planeswalker. And if they don't, they lose 5 life. So it's a really, really perfect finisher. Kills very fast, kills the creatures or planeswalkers. That has been bugged for like what feels like 10 years at this point. It's really like a few months, but poor guy has been trying to play this deck and it's been bugged for so long, and they fixed it recently, and then with the whole catastrophe last week it got bugged again but like a different bug. I feel so bad because the new bug is previously I think it just didn't trigger or something. That's probably wrong. But the new bug is it hits him as well, so he has to lose 5 life. It's so unfair.
I feel sorry too. That poor guy.
And so now he's trying to get this fixed again. And now this awesome new card for his deck, Opposition Agent, which I think the card has been massively overhyped, but I think it's still quite good, and it's perfect for this deck because he's playing Chromox and Ancient Tombs and stuff, and City Traders, or he's playing Dark Ritual, so he can turn 1 this card very often, and it's going to be pretty good there. I've seen multiple people say they put up 5-0s with it, which is cool, but that this is bugged as well. It's like, come on, give the guy a break. So
dude, he's like a debugging engine. Like he plays all the weird cards and he's submitting all these bug reports.
But it's only 2 cards now, and one of them is new. So I don't know. Maybe it is the Curses archetype, definitely cursed.
Yeah. I guess that's on flavor.
Yeah.
That's how it's supposed to be.
That's how he can feel
forever
better.
cursed.
Yeah. Hopefully they fix it.
So the main reason why I could never play the Curses deck is actually when I have been on the other side of that deck for multiple times, and whenever they play like Dark Ritual, curse you, and you have Veil of Summer, I feel like their heart must break into 2 pieces.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally. I never thought of that actually. That's really mean.
Oh yeah. That is a real heartbreaker. But yeah, I think you said it exactly right. I think that the Opposition Agent is a very niche card. It is in some contents a hate bear against combo decks, but then it costs like 3 mana. It isn't blue. It isn't pitchable. So you have to have a specific reason to run this hate bear, I guess, over other hate bears. And I think those reasons, they're exactly what Callum just said. You have Dark Ritual turn 1, you have Ancient Tomb, you have things that accelerate him out really fast, and then it's a great card. But other than that, I don't see it.
Yeah.
Like Strifo is playing 3 in his deck. We'll see if that pans out, because Strifo does have a...
Main deck?
Yeah, main deck.
Wow.
He has a very good nose for stuff. Like, he was one of the first people to just say Uro is flat out bust in Legacy. I think I was playing kind of like Chalice decks with it as well and saying this card is great, and he was playing it in his deck from just day one. He was like, yeah, it's just a matter of time till people play this card everywhere, and he was bang on. So just waiting to see what happens, because as I said, he's got a good nose for this kind of stuff, but my gut says exactly how Mark described it and how I said it before. It's a cool card in some decks, but I'm skeptical it'll find a home in lots of fair decks, like consistently in high numbers and stuff.
Okay, so moving on, talking about other cards that are not playable in Legacy. Well, our friend Good Brother, Scott, the owner of Paragon Games, he's got a question about Yorion Death and Taxes. You know, the Yorion list that I think XJ Cloud recently popularized. And he's just wondering what Mark thinks about the Yorion Death and Taxes list.
Just to be quickly housekeepery, it was Phil Braverman that did it first ages ago, and then Jason Murray, and then XJ got it from there, and then from there they've all built it and stuff. So just to be picky.
That's why I said popularized, right? He's basically the one who made people aware of it.
Yes, my bad.
That I think most people are associated with him with that.
True.
But yeah,
carry on.
I actually didn't know where it was coming from.
So I think about the Death and Taxes question, I think that's a really, really interesting question. And the reason why it's so interesting is that I do actually believe that it's very close. It's very close between the 80 card deck and the 60 card deck. And the 80 card deck has some good reasons why it could be better. And these reasons are specifically that you can put more silver bullets into your deck and not draw them as often and just find them with your recruiter. And that's obviously great. You can also put Yorion into your hand, and Yorion is actually a great late game card for Death and Taxes. Whenever I play against the 80 card deck, I'm really concerned about Yorion, and I need to have stabilize the board and have a Force of Will backup, because if they resolve that card and protect it with Caracas and get value by flickering, there comes into play effects. It's a really strong card in Death and Taxes. And at the same time, if you have an Aether Vial, you often have the mana free to put Yorion into your hand. So these are all upsides for the 80 card deck. But then I think the problem why it's not just strictly the better option is that it's obvious too, I guess, but in the 60 card version, you draw your more important cards more often, of course. So cards that are super important, in my opinion, are the Etterweil and the Talias. You just want them basically every game, and it's just less likely to draw them with 80 cards. And then the second problem that I faced was the biggest problem actually playing 80 cards when I tried Urion myself. I guess I tried it in blue decks, but it's a similar problem, is that your sideboard cards are just not as impactful. You will not see them as often. So I think it's a really close question. I personally would register the deck with Urion because I just think it's more fun to play, and it's a cooler version. But I think it's very close, and you should just play what you are more comfortable with.
Yeah, I feel similarly that it is close. It's very easy. I've seen a lot of people kind of just throw out the idea of playing 80 cards because you do want to see the vials much more consistently. But Urion is super real. Like it is the thing that swings the snow matchup. And that matchup is obviously incredibly popular, and it is tough for Death and Taxes. Skyclave Apparition made the matchup probably about 50-50. Snow has more tools, arguably, to kind of pull ahead if it needs to, but Urion is so strong. You can take the vial up to 5 and have a Caracas up, like you mentioned, and I've seen Jason Murray and XJ just destroy Snow decks consistently with this plan. So they've said it's to make Snow an easy matchup, which I think it does, and they're okay losing the consistency in the other matchups for that because they play against it so much.
Wow, that's a pretty big statement.
Yeah,
something that I honestly like. I'm not a big fan of Urion Death and Taxes. I think I would always register the normal one, but I can see the appeal of the Urion one, and something that puts it over the top, or rather like puts it beyond my threshold of being playable, is that you can bounce it with Caracas. You know how you can while it in for 5 if you want to, and you can bounce it with Caracas. So you get like a repeatable effect. It's not like this one-shot effect that you get from Urion, but it's gonna be a thing that's gonna be really hard to get rid of for the control player, unless they wanna 2-for-1 themselves by having 2 Swords to Plowshares on it in response to Caracas. At which point it's basically a 0-for-2 because it came from your sideboard. So that's something that makes it so that I wouldn't dismiss it. I just really like the lean effectiveness of the 60 card Death and Taxes build, but we are certainly seeing Urion Death and Taxes do really well in the metagame right now.
Yeah, for sure. There's really merit to both. I think if Snow just didn't exist, then you wouldn't be playing it, or if it was just like a small portion of the metagame, then you wouldn't see Urion. I think all the players who are playing it would agree. But it's because they need to beat this matchup consistently, which, yeah.
I think it's really cool that there are 2 versions of the deck which are really, really different. Not just one card different, just really different, play differently. And we're talking about it, and it's pretty clear that these 2 versions are very close in power level, and that people can just choose whichever one they like. I think that's so great if you have a lot of options in a format, which cards and which decks to play. So I love this component that Urion brings to the table for Death and Taxes.
That actually takes me to the second part of Scott's question, because he's asking how we feel about the companion mechanic in the way it works right now, and whether we would have preferred the original one. Obviously, we all played through Lurrus, and Lurrus was busted, so we shouldn't probably evaluate the companion mechanic based on Lurrus, but more on the original template without Lurrus, and I guess maybe Serda, because there's somewhat of a small push in the community to basically, bring back the old Lurrus, the old companion mechanic, as opposed to having to pay 3 mana. How do you feel about that?
So I have a very strong opinion on that, actually. And I wrote that on Twitter before, and that is that I think that the companion mechanic is straight up genius. It's a great mechanic. I love it. I loved it way better when the companion was just your 8th card in your hand. But Wizards screwed up. They just screwed up so massively when they designed the cards. The problem is that a card like Urion or Lurrus even more, or Serda, are just way too broken for the amount of deck building restrictions you put there. I think if you put Urion, you bump it up to 100 or 120, just a different design of the card, and you just have it as your 8th card in your hand, I think that would be way cooler. And there is one card, I think, where they hit it on the spot. The design is awesome, and that card is the Otter, how's he called? The blue red one, Lutri. I think that card is perfect design. It's so great. It puts a lot of restrictions on your deck. You can have each card only once in your deck. Only a single card of each card. But those decks would be crazy fun to play, and you get this insanely strong card into each of your opening hands. But nobody would say that is busted, and I'm pretty sure it would not break the format, and it would make the companion mechanic great, because it would actually add like a completely different angle, a completely different deck to the format, a completely different play pattern, and that's just awesome. And if you choose to have a companion, then it's really powerful, because you don't have to pay 3 mana to put it in your hand, you just have it there, but you had some really tough hoops to jump through. And that's my opinion on the mechanic. I think the mechanic is great, but the cards were balanced in a horrible way.
Yeah, that's exactly pretty much how I feel about it. You make a good point about how the restrictions should make it so that the deck you play is really unique. I used to think I kind of wanted to the companions to boost, the less competitive decks of Legacy, like the not so powerful ones that could use something like that. But I guess that's really hard, because that basically changes all the time. So you're basically saying that the restrictions should bring about an entirely new deck, an entirely new archetype. How I think Luri is it Luri? I already forgot the name. Does it? Lutri, that's the one. Because Lutri would basically bring about a deck that we've never seen before. And for those who don't know, the restriction is, I think you can only play one-offs, right? Is that how it works?
Non-basics.
Yeah.
Non-basic one-offs, yeah.
So, I think, just non-lands, actually. You can have 4 Flooded Strand in your decks, too.
Aha, okay.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess, you know what? Maybe they actually really hit the mark with that card.
Yeah.
That card is so great. I love it. I hate that they just, by doing this companion rework, they made that card unplayable. And it was just a very cool card before that.
I would, like, my guess would be that Wizards will never go back to the original design, unless, they have a future set that heavily revolves around companion, and they maybe will rework it. But usually when they decide something one way, they never really go back on it, except for, I guess the only time they did something like this was with Golgari Grave Troll in Modern, which was like unbanned and then banned again. That's like one of the few times that Wizards went like
that was weird, though,
direction.
because I think the card was a fine unban, and then they printed Cathartic Reunion like within the same month that it got unbanned to try out. So it was kind of turbocharged. But I wish that they would actually do that with Legacy. I wish they would try unbanning stuff. But that's a whole nother episode, I think.
One day Earthcraft shall rise
I think
again.
you could unban a third of the Legacy ban list.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I would love to do an episode on that. If you have me back in like half a year and want to talk about
absolutely
which cards should get unbanned, I'm a strong proponent of unbanning cards in Legacy. There's so many cards that are just sitting there, and they could just be free. Like, why was land tax banned for so long, right? And there's similar things for so many of those cards.
I mean, just think Black Vice was banned.
And of all the cards ever unbanned in Legacy, I think Black Vice had the smallest impact ever. Like, even Landtex saw a little bit of play in some experimental builds. Nobody ever tried breaking Black Vice in Legacy.
When it got unbanned, a guy that I buy a lot of singles off, I ordered a set because I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try it out as soon as it got unbanned. And he messaged me, he's like, Callum, are you sure you want these? It's not good.
That says everything you need to know.
Yeah.
Awesome. So moving on, we have 3 more questions. The next one is from Quash, and that's my favorite question, actually. Who does Marc hate facing on Magic Online the most?
Apart from Callum.
And that's particularly, apart from Callum, of course. That's particularly about which player. Like, you don't need to hate the player. Maybe you just, you hate facing them,
That's a really good question. Unfortunately, I've not been on a Modo long enough to realize that I played against anyone more than one time. And as such, my win percentage against Callum is actually 0%. So, Callum might be my nemesis. He might also not be. Who knows? But No, honestly, I think the combination of a player that plays decks that are good against Band Miracles, but at the same time is a very strong player, those are the scariest for me. And the number one name that drops into my head would be Pokimoki, the creator of Pokepile, because I think Pokepile is definitely a bad matchup for Band Miracles. You're definitely unfavored by a lot, actually. And if you then have the pilot who actually built the deck and like he's going crazy. I think he's 5-0 3 or 4 leagues in a row with it this month. He has the trophy leader. He is insanely good with the deck. And it's a bad matchup. Like, I can't imagine him not being my nemesis on Modo.
Oh, that's the next. That's the next. Well, we can't call it a grudge match, but the next, first to 10 matchup that we gotta set up for our awesome league there. I would love to see Mark and Pokimoki Chef get at it for
you would love to get me destroyed, right, Julian?
Dude, I've seen you destroyed many times in paper, but I've also seen you win even more times in paper.
We can set this up. He needs to play against Sam as well from earlier, so let's get something going.
Definitely. Oh, yeah. I'm in.
The Mark Gauntlet. Just throw like the best players.
Oh my god, that's like, Scott Pilgrim against the world. He has to like beat all those amazing people.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, cool. So moving on, we have a friend. We have a question from my Bavarian friend living in Japan now, Kai Savatari. Hey Julian, do you eat bratwurst and sauerkraut during rounds of Legacy Challenge? No, I actually eat them afterwards. No, seriously, like I think apparently there's like this whole meme that Germans eat sauerkraut. I think in my entire life I've eaten sauerkraut like twice. Like bratwurst like maybe once or twice a year, but not like at home. Sauerkraut, I don't know. I really don't know where that's coming from. Mark, how often do you eat sauerkraut?
Oh, I like sauerkraut. I think since I read about it, that it's like super healthy and it's a food that you can just it will not get bad. It will not spoil, so you can have it for years in your
pocket.
in your pocket, I guess. No, but yeah, you can just put it into your somewhere in your kitchen, and you can just whenever you feel like it, you just pull out some sauerkraut.
Like, I got this image in my head right now where it's just like all over your apartment there's like patches of sauerkraut, and you just like dig into them, and or you take them out of your bag at the tournament. You're like, got some sauerkraut, yes, superpowers.
No, I really like sausage and sauerkraut, so you got me there, Kai.
This is the secret to winning with miracles: just eat sauerkraut and sausage.
Oh, you're like Popeye, but with sauerkraut. The German Popeye. Okay, here we go. Okay, moving on to our final set of questions. This time coming from our good friend Tom the Decker from Belgium. He's got 4 different questions. So the first one is, what is Mark's process for deck development / tuning? Do you work alone or do you work with teammates? So how is that working for you, Mark?
I actually work alone, but I think a lot about it. I spend a lot of time tuning my deck. Like, people that know me, they always get annoyed by how much I talk about how I want to tune the last card in my deck. Like, I think you could even just hear this episode and know what I mean, because how much did I talk about that flag slot? And that's just one card out of the 75, and I could probably talk about each and every single card, every single decision, like also the mana base, every single land, every single card, every single number. I've gone through multiple times in my head, thinking, why is that the correct number? Why is it not? Which matchups does it benefit? Which one does it not? I'm just theory crafting a ton with this deck, and I've tried to fine tune it to perfection. So that's what I'm trying to do, and I mostly do that alone, and I use Theorycraft, and of course I use, to a lesser extent, testing.
Cool. So I guess that's a big reason why a lot of us enjoy Magic, right? To a certain degree, people really want to Theorycraft and like work on those little small percentages to make an overall better outcome. So yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to that, and I think most people who've been sitting or playing the same deck for a while, they develop that kind of approach to the deck. That's cool.
Definitely, for example, how Archmage Charm got in the deck. I thought like it does so many things I wanted to do, but then it's 3 mana, and Counterspell was actually bad. I love Counterspell, but I had to cut it. And I was like, how can Archmage Charm ever be good? And then I theory crafted about it. Then I played it a couple of games, and was great. So
cool.
you just have to think about the things. You have to also try them out, of course. You cannot just theory craft, but especially in a deck like Band Miracles, every single decision matters because, again, of Ponder and Brainstorm. And as I said in the beginning of the show, there's matchups. For example, I put in the Shark Typhoon about, I think, six weeks ago, and there were matchups that went from unwinnable to being good matchups. And that would be, for example, Green-White Reclaimer. That's really just cool, one card.
That's the nature of Legacy. That's this joke, right? I've got this bad matchup. How did you fix it? I added one sideboard card. Now it's favorable.
All we need is sharks.
That joke is actually has a really has a lot of truth in it. I think in the Brainstorm Ponder decks, it's just so crucial to have that one card that beats them.
Awesome. So talking about the future, Tom is also wondering about your quote-unquote pro status, right? Because after you won the GP, I think you played in 2 or 3 pro events, as in like, pro tours or whatever they are called now. And he's asking whether you have any aspirations, for making it into Rivals or maybe even MPL, or are you rather focused on just Eternal formats?
So, that is a very good question, because I think a lot of people, they think, oh, it would be so great to be there, get in the MPL, play in the Pro Tour. And I absolutely don't have that feeling, honestly. I played in these 3 events. I had the 2 Players Tour Regionals, and you qualify directly if you win a GP for the Players Tour Finals, which is like, even, I think, better than a PT was before, because it's even smaller. What I mean by better is better player field, I guess. So it's really hard to qualify for it. You have to first qualify for the Players to Regionals and then do really, really well in that. Or you have to win a GP, or you have to be in the MPL. So that's why it's only just right above 100 players in it. And so I played these 3 events, and I think I did really well. I won multiple thousands of dollars. I got into day 2, 2 out of 3 events. I actually got into the top 64 in those, and in the one I could have maybe even gotten into top 16, and that is actually true. My internet fell out right in the round of the Players Tour Finals. So I lost the round, which where I had, I'm not exaggerating, I basically had lethal on this deck. I could have cast in that turn an Expansion Explosion for 20 damage. So I had lethal, and actually Mike Segrest tweeted about it. He was like, looked like my opponent had lethal, but then didn't play the card. So yeah, that was heartbreaking. Okay, but that was a story on the side. What the point that I wanted to get at, I did decently well at these events, but I did not enjoy them at all, because I hate playing formats that I don't want to play. That's the first thing. I just don't really enjoy if somebody forces me to play historic or standard, and I just hate it, because Magic is my hobby. I like to choose what I want to do, and I like not to be dictated by wizards, and then it really feels like a job. So that's the one thing. The other thing is that the tournaments themselves, I guess they were at home this time, so I played them from home, and it just felt like more like a test than really fun, because you're sitting there in your room, you're playing all those hours, you need to be very concentrated, and then also the field is like super mega omega competitive, right? It's not the same like fun jokingly thing when you sit down at the GP against a legacy player. It's really I almost want to say cutthroat. You really have to get down to it to win. You have to use every single option you have. That's, I think, why pros, a lot of them, they try to use every edge, call the judge, and these things. It's actually true. I guess it's their job. They need to perform, and they need to get every percentage point. But it's absolutely not a world I would love to join. And then in the beginning, I also said it, I always prioritize my job. I love my job. I love working on artificial intelligence as much as I like to play Magic. And I get a lot of more money out of that than ever playing Magic in the MPL. So I really have no aspiration to get there.
Cool. So I like that there's always this allure of, becoming a pro, playing on the Pro Tour. But if you're in a position where you can say, dude, this is my hobby and I want to play it for fun and I don't enjoy these other formats, if you're aware of that and you don't have these kind of aspirations, then all the money you win in events like this, that's just like a bonus, but you don't consider it like, oh, I need to perform here to, chase my dream of the rivals, MPL, whatever. And
exactly.
Especially this year, even like just with regards to prize money, I think with all the third-party events that are going on right now, you can even like win quite a lot of money in Legacy these days. So it's not like you, by making that decision, you're leaving a ton of money on the table compared to how much extra time you would need to invest. So that's a cool thing to do. That also segues into Tom's third question. What do you actually do like during your free time? Do you play like other formats? Do you have any hobbies that you do outside of Magic? And I guess that would be your chance to name drop Commander. Old School Commander, I think, is a format you've been promoting a lot.
That's cool. Yeah, so basically what I do outside in my free time. So first of all, I of course want to name, I have 2 children. They're 2 and 4 years old. They're absolutely awesome. I love to play board games with them. That's like my favorite thing to do outside of playing card games. And then what else do I do in my free time? I play other card games or Magic, other formats. I just love the old formats of all of those card games. I love to play. I just recently got into Old School, Magic Old School, where you can only play the cards from 93 and 94. And I just found that the community there is just as great as the Legacy community. It even has some overlap. Our friend Francis, like Callum's and my friend Francis, he's playing the format, and it's just so much fun to play these old formats that don't change, where you don't need to buy cards all the time, where you can play your strategy with you like, where it's not about winning. Actually, it's really not about winning, but it's about playing the most fun deck that you enjoy. For example, I just love Ivory Tower. I wouldn't touch an old school deck without Ivory Tower in it, so my old school deck has 4 Ivory Tower. That's just fun for me. That's what I do outside of playing Legacy. And then what's also really important is not only these old school formats, where actually, you just said it, Julian, where we kind of invented, I guess it was there before, but our community invented the format that's called Old School Commander. It's just, basically, you have all the old school cards available, including Black Lotus and all the stuff. It's all allowed, Sol Ring, Moxen, Time Walk, but you can only play the commanders also from the old sets from 93 and 94. And now you would say, okay, those are just the commanders from Legends. But no, there's actually some namesake cards which should have been Legends but never were Legends. I think there is some reasoning, because apparently Arabian Nights was a world that was splintered into 1,000 worlds, so there were many Aladdins, but in their own way, every Aladdin was a legend. So we the community decided to have like monocolored legends, so you have like Aladdin and Sindbad and Onkel Istvan and all these crazy ones. You can also play them as a commander, so you have for each color at least one legend that you could play. So it's a great format. It's just a ton of fun. You have to be prepared to get wrecked by Library of Alexandria, but that's totally fine. It's just a ton of fun.
Is there a website we can put in the show notes for the format? Is there anything?
Yes, I can link that.
Awesome. So we're going to have that in the show notes as well. That's great. That takes us to our final question here. Before we round up the show here, it's going to be, Marc, what has your best Magic trip been? I think that's a really cool question in lights of maybe, traveling, returning sometime next year, and people are really eager to play paper Magic again. So if you look back, what has your like single or like a couple of your best Magic trips that you enjoyed the most? What were those? So the Magic trip that I enjoyed the most, I think, was back in 2007. It was my first GP that I ever played in my life in Stuttgart. It was also, I think, the last GP that was ever held in Germany because of our gambling laws. I think we had another one in 2010 in Bochum, but yeah, that's one
maybe
of the very last
there
ones.
Was one afterwards, but it was one of the last GPs in Germany. And for me, it was my first GP. I was completely overwhelmed. I had never seen that many Magic players on one place. I was like, whoa, this is completely insane. And then people like Gabriel Nassif were walking by, and I was like, wow, this is a real person. I just heard about him, but this is insane. It was all new to me. And I was there with a bunch of my friends from Munich. It was just an awesome trip. And then, of course, what put like the crown on that trip was definitely that this was my first GP, and I just got mega lucky. I had no idea about this format back in the days, but I made top 8 of my first GP I ever played in, limited, which is absolutely not my format, but I spiked it. I remember opening an insane sealed pool, going 9-0, beating Gabriel Nassif on the way, and I was like this young guy that had not a lot of experience in Magic, and now seeing all this new world for the first time, and also winning, being the only one that's 12-0 with 0 buys. It was that can never be topped. I guess then there's also the win in Bologna, which in its own way topped this, of course. And in Bologna, the favorite part was definitely the dinner after I won. I invited all the people that were still in the hall. It was really funny. Everybody was like, I actually reserved the table at the Italian restaurant before the top 8, because I was like, doesn't matter if I win it or not, I'm gonna invite my friends to pizza. And then I won it, and I was like, okay, everyone that's here in the hall, please follow me. I'm gonna invite you all to pizza. And that was just insane. That was so great. I loved that dinner. That was the favorite part of the whole GP for me.
Dude, that was such an amazing weekend, especially like we were sitting at a restaurant and we were watching like through, I think it was Beer with Two Guns who was streaming the entire thing on some Discord. I think actually 2 or 3 people.
It was me. I was watching. Francis was like updating us constantly. And yeah, maybe it was actually him. Someone was also, so Francis was sending us messages, like just every single update saying what's going on. And I think it was Bear who was like recording it as well. And so we're all in this pub, like just everyone glued to these 2 screens, just like waiting for updates. You called it like guerrilla reporting or whatever. It was like, it was so exciting. I don't know, like we all jumped up when you won. It was so exciting.
That was really great. You also posted the video and sent it to me, and I could really feel it, and that was so cool, because Wizards did not do any coverage of that event, right? And I afterwards I posted on Twitter that the unsung heroes are the ones that actually featured the top 8. Bear with Two Guns, he filmed like the entire finals. Mm-hmm. You could see, you can still find it on YouTube, I think. It's just insane what the community did, and then also you guys already hanging out in the pub, but like being glued to your cell phones. And I had a video of when somebody said Mark won it, and you all got crazy, and I was like, man, this is the best day of my life. It honestly felt like the best day of my life. This was insane.
Oh, dude, that's such great memories, and like, I can only imagine how great it must have felt for you, man. I was so happy for you. I guess the video where I freak out when I win, it kind of got viral too, right? Honestly, that kind of video is one of the best advertisements for like Magic Wizards could ever wish for. I don't think they ever used it for anything, but that's what. If you haven't seen it, I think I'm gonna put it in the show notes as well. That's the moment right after Mark won.
Oh man, I look crazy in that video. But for everyone, disclaimer, I played 2 full days of Magic, had to be mega focused. Every game was deciding. It was like such a huge burden that it fell from my shoulders. So please be aware, I freaked out there. That's not my normal behavior.
So I hope we can see a lot more freakouts, maybe in maybe 2021. Who knows? I don't think there will be GPs in 2021 because like of how long the planning and everything works. But who knows? Maybe something else. So that stuff, especially from Bologna, that really gives me some of my paper fix, even just watching it. Wow, guys, this has already been our longest episode ever. This is like right now we're sitting at 2 hours 40. I think we're gonna call it a day here. What do you think?
I think so. We did actually, before it started, we were like, okay, we'll try it, because we had so much to cover. We're like, let's try and keep it slow, but I mean shorter, but there was nothing to skip. It was just all fucking, it was all fantastic.
Awesome. Mark, thank you so much for coming on. I'd love to have you back on, future episodes if you talk, like you already mentioned a couple of things you'd love to talk about. Yeah. Those are always popular as well. That's just like, the hot topics of Magic, the hot topics of Legacy. It's it's always ban lists, sideboard guides, and that's pretty much what everybody wants.
Do you have a sideboard guide for Oko bannings?
Now it's getting deep. If you want to support everything or anything that we are doing, there's like many different ways. You can leave a review on iTunes. You can like tell your friends all about this. Honestly, I think that's one of the most underrated things that you can do to support your favorite creators. Just tell people about it, whether it's online, whether it's in paper. It's like Magic players don't say in real life, they say in paper. But you can also support us on Patreon. So patreon.com/everydayeternal. And become a patron. Join our Discord, submit your questions, join our food porn channel, which I actually opened just today because for some reason our Discord spiraled into everybody posting awesome dishes, and then that one thing led to another, and now there's tons of food on the food porn channel. So you can join that by becoming a Patreon. And yeah, that's by the way, Marc, where can people find you on social media? What's your Twitter? What's your Twitch? What's your OnlyFans?
So the best way to contact me is definitely via Twitter. You can always tweet me. My hashtag is #ICameToGame with an underscore between all the...
Is that your hashtag?
Not my hashtag, sorry. My my Twitter handle, I guess it's what it's called, is #ICameToGame. And you can always ask me there. I will respond. I think so far I responded to every question I got on Twitter. And then, of course, you can watch my Twitch channel. It's twitch.tv/Pemmin. And
with 2 M's, right?
2 M's, that's correct. I think that's just it.
Awesome, cool. So I want to give shout-outs to our Patreons who are making all of this possible, especially, our Eternal Witness Patreons, Valerio, Tommy Hinks, Trent Browers, Testicular, and Moritz Vogel, as well as our Grizzlebrand supporters, Victor Bernatzt, Baju Butt, Scott Monroe, Kulish Alistay, Jeremy Gates, and Henrik Korkutz. Thank you so much for all your support. If you want to find out more about Everyday Eternal, you can hit us up on @EternalMTG on Twitter. That's probably the best way, other than our Discord, to submit questions or suggestions for future episodes. And let us know how you feel about Sauerkraut. I'd actually love to hear from more people because my interactions with Sauerkraut have really been limited to my sister and my mother actually drinking it only drinking Sauerkraut juice for 2 weeks because they read about the health benefits. And maybe that's why I still feel weirded out by Sauerkraut.
That's a thing.
Sorry guys, I really have to leave the call now. I'm so hungry for Sauerkraut. I can't retain myself anymore. Sorry.
Stay tuned. Next week, we're actually going to have a Sauerkraut sponsorship. I don't know how and where, but it's going to become a thing.
The video from Bologna is actually Marc just like going crazy, not because he won the GP, he was just so hungry for Sauerkraut.
Okay, so we're going to call it a day here. Let us know about your feedback. Let us know if you're going to pick up miracles, how much Sauerkraut you can eat in a single day. And I think that's going to be it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. See you, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.